Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the greatest live show of all time. That is right, everybody. Now, today we're going to be talking about DemonMama. More specifically, DemonMama's horrible take on mandatory education. Now, why am I talking about her take on mandatory education? All zero of you are asking. I know. All zero of you are so eager to hear what this is all about. Well, I decided to do a new thing on my channel. I guess this isn't really a new thing. It's more of like an old thing that I'm sort of focusing a little bit more on, which is debate analysis. However, before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that's watching the VOD, I always make sure to include timestamps in the description below after the fact, so it's easy to skip around. So if you don't want to watch the entire thing for whatever wacky reason, you're more than welcome to use those to skip around. Though you can also skip around if you, or I already said that. I mean, you can also watch the entire thing. It's formatted to be like a podcast. Now, before we dive right into this, I just want to give a quick disclaimer. I don't have anything against DemonMama as a person. I actually quite like her content. I think that she generally does a pretty good job. And most of the time, if she has a take, I'm generally going to agree with it. So that's why her takes on mandatory education kind of, I don't know, stick out like a sore thumb, right? Now, for those of you who have been around for a while, you may or may not remember a stream I did called The Next Vaush, where in the thumbnail it says Vaush 2.0, because people had compared me to Vaush, and because of that, I decided to play into it. Now, interestingly enough, I watched a specific video from Vaush that somebody had recommended to me, where it was a debate between DemonMama and somebody else named Hanz, and Vaush was reacting to it. Now, this was a while ago, but from what I remember, DemonMama had some horrifically incorrect takes, unfortunately. So, as a result of that, let's just say I wasn't a big fan of her takes. Now, recently, I decided to, look more into it, because I knew that it must have been something that she had talked about prior in order to, make it into a debate subject, or for whoever was debating her to make it into the subject for debate, right? It doesn't just come out of nowhere. That being said, I did find the original videos of her talking about the her takes on education. And so I guess that leads us into the first segment or video or whatever for today. After I drink a little bit of water, of course. It's very important to stay hydrated, folks. Always make sure to drink lots of water. Anyways, see how fast and simple that is? It feels great. You know, you're all hydrated. It's good for you. Takes like 2 seconds. Make sure to drink water today, okay, chat? All right. Now, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Now, the first video we're going to be looking at is called that's not good. It's on the wrong screen. That's not good. Why is react mode not working? That's really not good. What the hell? Yeah, that's not how it's supposed to work, but okay. Alright, so it looks like I'm gonna have to, something mess with the display. Hold on. Nope, that didn't fix it. Oh no. Extend displays. Nope. Identify as 1 and 2. No, no, no. Okay, wait. Show only on 1. Okay. Keep changes. Extend these displays. Keep changes. Wait, what? Okay, that's weird. Display 1. Hello? What? I've never had this issue. Literally never. What is happening? Identify the displays. It's displays 1 and 2. Oh, God. What is happening? Why don't your VODs have the chat replay on your most recent streams? Oh, that might be a bug. Or, like, something I did by accident. I don't know. If that's the case, I'll have to fix it. Oh, no. What the hell? No. Automatic. Display 2. Okay, I think I fixed it. Yep, I fixed it. Okay, chat, sorry. Now we can start with the thingy-majigger. Of course, Kick Chat is being horny as per usual. What can I say? Best thing I can do is ignore it. So yeah, anyways, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Now, the first video we're going to be looking at is called MAGMA Hot Take. Compulsory schooling sucks. Now, I agree that the school system sucks, believe it or not. But apparently this take was so hot that, well, let's just say it didn't get the best like to dislike ratio. But I'm not somebody that judges videos based on what a plurality of people deem to be the case. So, without further ado, let's get started.
Are you ready for the real hot take? Are we ready to talk about school? Are you ready to talk about school? Because we were talking about education, and it's time to talk about fucking school. Are you fucking ready?
I sure am, DemonMama.
Oh boy, here we go.
That sounds like the start of a YouTuber apology.
Let's talk about motherfucking school, okay? So, I got a lot to say about fucking school.
Don't we all? Oh, this video is old. Oh, yeah, I know. But I still think it's worth talking about. It's less about DemonMama and more about a starting point to sort of kick off a certain discourse that I want to talk about.
Guys, school's kind of bad, okay? You dropped out of school specifically to avoid this conversation. You and a lot of other people. You and a lot of other people, actually. Yeah, everybody here groaning when they hear about school. Isn't that a little weird?
It sure is, DemonMama.
Isn't that a little bit weird? That people's reaction to school is so goddamn negative, okay?
That's true. I couldn't agree more.
That's fine, that's fine. I don't disagree that certain things can be communicated in simple ways, just some things really, really struggle to or can't, okay? That's all. All right, let's talk about it, okay? I want to show you something real quick. We got a little study here, okay?
Oh boy, I'm so excited.
All right? This is just a little brief thing, and this isn't meant to be the final evidence that proves everything, but a study was done. There was a sort of informal study done by a writer for a PhD who's a writer for Psychology Today, okay? And I want to show you this, okay? Let's look at this. 128 readers responded to the survey. So this is just an offhand survey, but I think it's illustrative, and I think it will prove to be a starting point. But again, not the last empirical thing. 128 readers responded to the survey. 73% mentioned high school, 34% mentioned college, 12% elementary school, and 7% middle school or junior high. Nearly everyone rated their dreams about school as unpleasant. Nobody rated them as pleasant.
Yeah, I mean, that does make sense. I don't see an issue with that, obviously.
Exam dreams can be so real that we actually wake up convinced we just failed an important test. At least 1 in every 5 people will experience an exam-related dream in their lives. None of them positive. Okay?
Obviously, all of this is true, and I don't disagree with anything she's said so far. It's just that later, she'll come to certain conclusions that I do disagree with.
The modern education system is a shared nightmare, and we are all conditioned to assume that that's a normal thing and not indicative of something terribly wrong with the institution of schooling. Okay? A collective nightmare. Okay? And following from this, I want to talk about a hot take about compulsive schooling. Because there's been a lot of talk about it. A couple of people on Twitter were talking about it. There was some discourse about it. Gayfesh, I literally had a dream that I had to retake high school. The dream lasted 4 years. I was 20 years older than anyone else in all my class. It was the worst dream ever. I have had almost that exact dream. In fact, frequently, I have nightmares about having not about finding out right now at age 30 that I didn't get all of the credits I needed to actually graduate high school. And
I'd like to briefly mention the fact that, yes, the amount of trauma induced by school and I guess the failures of the school system is very real, right? I'm not here to downplay that. I'm not here to claim, oh yeah, the school system is fine. It's totally not fucking terrible and complete and utter dog shit, right? As somebody that's been, well, not treated very nicely by the school system, I would know, right? Unfortunately, I do have the big autism, and, well, the school system, at least the school system in the great United States of America, is not very nice to autistic people, if I'm going to be totally real.
That I didn't actually have my high school diploma. I've had that dream, like, within the last couple of months. Okay? And I was a stellar student. I killed academically.
I was considered talented, but I also didn't put forth that much effort. I just sort of did school and somehow got good grades, but I basically did almost no homework outside of school just because why the fuck would I? And somehow I still managed to do pretty decently.
I was in honor roll. I was on the dean's list in my college. I was very good at school. So let me wind up this what we're talking about real quick by talking about some of the things where I'm coming from here, okay? So first of all, I was very good at school. In fact, I loved school. When I went to school, I was excited because it meant getting out of the house. It meant learning things, which I have always been excited about learning things. Big surprise that I'm excited about learning things. I liked school by and large.
Yeah, and surprisingly enough, I actually hated school, believe it or not.
Now, there were some things I didn't like about school. I struggled.
Same. I don't know, fucking all of it.
Socially in some ways. And what did I say? Compulsory. Yes, compulsory. Compulsory. So, and I was very, very good at school. I was, I graduated in the top of my class. It was very, very good. I did very good in college.
Congratulations.
Also, I went to a private, unaccredited Christian school.
Yikes.
For a while. Believe it or not. I know, right? I grew up in a cult. Imagine that. I went to an unaccredited Christian school for a while. I was almost homeschooled. Okay? So
which would have been fucking terrifying, I'm sure.
I've run the gamut of education. I've sort of been, I've sort of been in all of those spots. And And so I have a lot of experience when I'm talking about this.
Yeah, I'd like to point out the fact that I am somebody that is very against religious schools and homeschooling generally. Because what you end up with is you end up with more Christian fundamentalist freaks in the world, and that's not what we need. We don't need more Christian fundamentalist freaks. Sorry, I just put some Aquaphor lotion on my lips, so it's kind of annoying to talk. Sorry. Yeah, anyways, as I was saying, we don't need more people that are indoctrinated in what is essentially delusion, right? We don't need more people to be deluded into believing in Christian fundamentalist conservative ideology, right? I think that both me and DemonMama would agree on that. That being said, the position that she's about to present, I suppose, maybe not about to, but is going to inevitably at some point, is one that would exacerbate. I can't say fucking. Oh my god, I'm retarded.
And that's just to say that so you understand the context of my words, okay? Look, school is traumatizing for most people.
I don't know if I'd say for most people, but for a lot of people, yes, absolutely.
In my experience, it is severely traumatizing for most people, and in the best of cases. And in the worst cases, it is life-ruining.
I don't know. I mean, my case definitely was one of the worst ones. I don't know if I would say it was life-ruining. I wouldn't say that it's the worst or whatever, but it definitely wasn't a good case.
I don't know if you know this, but, like, trans people have a really low rate of graduating high school. And that probably doesn't come as much of a surprise.
So this would have less to do with the education system in terms of forcing people to go. And again, this would have more to do with the social pressures that be, right? So it could be the case that the system itself is fine or not terrible. Not saying that it's not terrible, by the way. But hypothetically, if it was, transphobia could still be an issue, right? So it could be the case that there are other students that are transphobic. Now, what would this mean? Well, that would mean that it would probably be beneficial to implement some sort of additional whatever, some sort of, I guess, improve things like sex ed and include the fact that, oh yeah, there's trans people, they exist, they're cool. Don't be mean to them, I guess. Whatever, right? But that wouldn't be about the compulsory schooling as like a fundamental concept. And you're going to notice a lot of this is DemonMama will bring up valid points of contention regarding the school system, but then she'll somehow jump to the conclusion that this somehow means that schooling shouldn't be mandatory and that children should have the autonomy to just not go to school. And that's sort of where I start having an issue. Again, we haven't gotten there yet, so we're not there. Let's continue.
Because of the homophobia and transphobia that gets slung at people who are gender nonconforming, people who are different.
That is true.
But also because there is abuse and this bullying is often reinforced by teachers and by the structures of the school.
I do sort of agree with that. Again, it's going to depend on what school you go to. But I think that has more to do with a general reflection on a societal problem rather than a schooling one, right? You have to keep in mind that school and education in general are going to reflect where society is currently at a lot of the time. So if society is currently at a place that is not where it should be, then it's going to be the case that school is going to follow that trend. So if society at large is homophobic or transphobic at large, then obviously schools are also going to be reflective of that, whether it be in the student population, the teacher, the teachers, whatever it may be. They're going to have the same biases that any broader society that they participate in is going to have, right?
Itself. Keep in mind, there are schools that require the school counselors, the counselors who are supposed to be there to help you, to divulge information to your parents.
Which should not be the case, obviously. Like, that would be an example of something that the school system does wrong.
Which your parents might be the ones causing you harm. This happens all the time. School counselors are used as a punitive measure.
I also want to point out the fact that, I guess, the proposition in the title, in terms of compulsory schooling sucking, I absolutely agree with. It does suck. The school system sucks. It needs to be better, to say the very least. The proposition that she has made multiple times, and we'll get into that I disagree with, again, is that children should have the option to just not go to school.
Puerto Rican musician says, yep, my social anxiety stopped me from going to my all-white school because I got called a dirty Mexican every day. That's horrible. That's horrible. But it's not just inter-student bullying. There is a lot of issues with school. And I want to talk about the idea of compulsory education, which is something that some lefties, but a lot of liberals are totally on board with. And I have a problem with the idea of forcing children to go to school on threat of state violence. And yes, that is what it is.
So here's where we're going to disagree. Because people that are children are, well, I'm not going to say that every child is a complete idiot, but children on average, generally as an aggregate, are prone to making some fairly stupid decisions. Take me as a child, for instance. When I was growing up, especially in my earlier years, if I was simply given the option to, I don't know, not go to school and just stay home and play on the Wii all day, you better believe that that is precisely what I would have done. Why? Because I, at the time, rightfully was able to identify the fact that school fucking sucks. But what I wasn't able to correctly identify, at least not to the extent I would have needed to properly evaluate whether or not I go to school as an actual decision, is what is the alternative, right? You either go to school, it's shitty and it sucks, but then you have potential job opportunities and whatnot. You actually have some sort of future. Or you don't go to school and you don't have the job opportunities that would otherwise be available to you, especially if you go to college, which, again, very expensive. Not good that that's the case. But, again, this is an idea that only works under the pretense that the child is always going to make the right decision for themselves, which simply isn't the case. Children make wrong decisions all the time. I mean, hell, adults also make wrong decisions all the time. Children just do it to a greater extent. You see what I'm sort of getting at? It's not that the school system is good or that it's operating the way it ought to, or that you get everything you should out of school, or that you're not wasting any of your time with some of the dumb shit that you're forced to learn in school that maybe you don't need to learn. Whatever it may be, you have to keep in mind that there is no proper alternative that would actually work. Not to mention the fact that if you decide that, okay, well, because kids can't make good decisions, let's leave it up to the parents. Well, now you just have the standard libertarian center-right argument where it's up to the parents to decide, and the government shouldn't tell the parents what to do. So if you're a religious fundamentalist freak who wants to indoctrinate your child in nothing but Christian fundamentalist propaganda, then, well, I guess according to DemonMama, that would be a worthwhile sacrifice, I guess. Though I don't think that she would say that, because she would acknowledge the fact that that's fucking insane. But whatever. Let's continue.
In most of the United States, there are truancy laws, which can get a parent in trouble, can get a parent fined or even put in jail time if their kid doesn't go to school, if their kid hates school. So this, by threatening the parent, this...
Well, yeah, I think that the vast majority of kids are going to hate school. Like, that's sort of just how it is, right? But again, the alternative is that they don't go to school and then they don't have a future. So, again, you're choosing from two bad options. And this is coming from DemonMama, somebody that I would think would understand the importance of being able to choose between two horrible options and the knowing which one is correct, right? So, for instance, you might not like Donald Trump or Joe Biden. You might think, well, they both suck. What's the point of voting? Well, the point of voting is that Joe Biden is the lesser of two evils. He's a lot less bad and is going to do a lot less damage than Trump. And, you know, maybe he'll actually do a few good things, right? I see education in this country in a similar light. Is it ideal? No. Could it be 5 trillion times better? Yes. But the lack of education, being able to just not go to school or learn anything and just sit home and play Fortnite all day or whatever the fuck, or just do nothing, or just avoid school in whatever way the child sees fit. I see that as the Donald Trump in the situation. That's the alternative. Again, you might not like Joe Biden, but it's better than the alternative, right? Similar concept here.
Forces the kids to keep going to school, even if school is traumatic to them, even if they're not...
Okay, as somebody that had a terrible experience in school, and again, I unfortunately suffer from having the big autism and ADHD, and I fucking hated everything about school. I have talked about my negative experiences in my early childhood in quite a lot of depth in previous streams, so I don't want to get too much into it, because then I feel like I'm repeating myself. But essentially, I would be the perfect example of somebody that the school system fucks over, basically, that is not intended for the school system, because I'm neurodivergent. First of all, if you are not a cog in the machine, well then fuck you. I guess. I am by default quite contrarian. I've had emotional regulation issues, sensory issues, all sorts of issues in the past that aren't as prevalent anymore. And while it does suck that, I don't know if I'd say that my experience in school was traumatic. I mean, I'm probably downplaying it if it is traumatic, because that's what people who experience trauma do, is they downplay it. So maybe I did experience trauma, because it was pretty bad. I don't have fond memories of school. That being said, I'm still glad that I was forced to go through that traumatic experience, because what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is I don't get a proper education, right? I don't think that, considering the fact that let's just continue, all right? We're only 7 minutes in, and we want to watch more of this, obviously.
Not gaining anything from school, even if school is dangerous to them. American schools have been increasingly converted into these sort of high security nightmares with security cameras and metal detectors and drills. Have you ever seen the drills that are required in a lot of schools now? active shooter drills where you have a guy go around and shake the door to scare the kids, and the kids don't know because it's a drill. They don't know it's not a shooter.
Oh, is that something that actually happens? I mean, I'll take her word for it.
And that is, you are required to go there. By law, by the state, that is compulsory education. Even if it's horrifying, even if it's so nightmarish that it literally scars you for fucking life. Let me tell you something else. Do you know how many bomb threats I had growing up? I lived through, I think, 4 separate bomb threats on my school. 4. Now, I was tough and brave and whatever, and I had, at the time, I was mostly just dealing with depression and a little bit of anxiety, and it wasn't really fixated around violence. But I had 4 bomb threats, and everybody has to keep going. What if you had, like, if you are a kid who lives through a fucking bomb scare, what if you just don't want to go to school for a while because you're scared?
I mean, that would be valid, and at this point, I would say that this would be an argument for, like, having the option to, like, do it virtually or online or whatever. Again, that would have to be the kid's decision, not the parents'. And ultimately, I mean, that would be fair enough. If online isn't an option, let's say if we're talking about whatever, when she was growing up, because obviously that was pre-COVID, so online wasn't really much of a thing, then I guess, yeah, I don't know what you would do. Like, you can't just not get an education, right? So I don't know what the solution there would be, but I mean, you have to keep in mind that, like, the statistical likelihood of a bomb threat actually being followed through with is quite low. But obviously you have to evacuate the building if there is a bomb threat, right? But yeah, I don't know how I feel about that.
You're not allowed. You're not allowed to do that. You have to keep going. There's problems with the idea of compulsory education, especially when we recognize that our educational system itself is completely fucked. And this,
again, this has nothing to do with it being compulsory and everything to do with the education system being fucked, right? Like, regardless of whether or not people are forced to go, like, that doesn't, if people stopped being forced to go tomorrow, like, that wouldn't unfuck up the education system. If anything, it would make it worse.
This is where we're going to get into the real meat, okay? Because schools they're not the bastions of learning that you think they are. They really are not.
Oh, no, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, you do learn some stuff. You learn some skills. You learn some information, whatever. But you don't go there just to learn, right? You go there to be a cog in the machine, basically.
Schools are designed to be efficient. We cram students into way outdated classrooms with fuckloads of students in it, with no teachers, with teachers who have to buy their own shit. And by the way, that is all over the United States. Teachers have to buy their own stuff as a part of the job. They have to buy their own school supplies. And this is compulsory. You have to go to this.
Yeah, again, the problem isn't that it's compulsory. Once again, the problem is that schools are underfunded. Like, you're talking about legitimate issues. Yeah, the teachers have to buy their own supplies, which is fucking bullshit. I agree. And then you bring the compulsory element into it, like as if it's somehow related. It's not. Regardless of whether or not school is compulsory, that's still a problem. It could be the most optional thing on the planet, and that wouldn't unfuck up the public education system.
Where you have to go and participate in a structure that treats children like they're on an assembly line. School doesn't allow you to choose what you're interested in. They force you to learn a bunch of topics that you might not even like or might struggle with. And if
that's true, but there are some instances in which it's going to be the case that you should learn them anyway, right? Because they might be useful. And you might not know what you like until you try it, right? So it could be the case that you fucking despise whatever math subjects, but for all you know, before you take a few math classes, You might actually be really good at it and really interested in it. You never know. Now, I guess I was somewhere in between where I was good at it but not very interested in it. But to each their own, right?
If you do badly at that topic that you don't like, you're punished. You're punished. You might even get suspended if you're struggling with it. There is so much trauma wrapped.
Well, I don't think you get suspended for getting a bad grade. I think you get, I mean, you might have to retake a class, but I don't think that that's specifically something you would get suspended for, right?
Up. There's a really great little thing. I'm gonna show you this. Watch. This illustrates it so goddamn well. Okay, ready? This is really cool. Come on, drills are not new. Boomers went through nuclear attack drills. That's why it's normalized. That's fucked. That's fucked too. That's really fucked. That's not better. You're not making a good argument for that. That's fucked.
Agreed.
Have you seen the boomers? The boomers' brains are gone.
Yeah, I would not use that as an example.
Shouldn't we at least teach kids the basic maths literacy? Fuck yeah. That's awesome. But why?
Okay, so what if they don't care about that? What if they don't care about the basic math or basic literacy? If they don't give a shit and schooling isn't mandatory, they could just not go and not learn the basic shit that they need. According to DemonMama's own proposition, they could just not learn those things because it's optional. But like that's the problem with it being optional.
Why does it have to be compulsory? Why does it have to be compulsory?
Because the alternative is that a few kids that are dumb because they're kids. Not all kids are dumb, okay? Some kids are smart when they're kids, right? Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to become smart, or some people just never get there. But that's besides the point. The fact of the matter is, you shouldn't be eliminating future jobs from being viable for yourself, right? You shouldn't be eliminating those as possibilities simply because when you're a fucking 7-year-old, you decide that reading is stupid and boring, so you don't want to learn it. Okay, so if you don't want to learn it because it's stupid and boring, which, I mean, hell, that's how I felt about it at the time. It's like, yeah, fuck this shit. I don't get anything out of this. But at the end of the day, being able to read and write and do basic math is actually quite useful in the real world, just in general, just as a skill to have. I wouldn't be as articulate as I am now if I wasn't forced to learn these things. See, the problem is that when you are like me and you have the big autism, what's going to end up happening a lot of the time is generally society in of itself is not going to be too kind to you. You have to keep in mind that the education system is simply going to be a reflection, just a mere reflection of the current state of society at large. So when you end up with a society that's in late-stage capitalism, well, what do you think is going to be a reflection of that more than anything else? Well, obviously the education system is going to reflect that. It's going to reflect all of the problems that occur with late-stage capitalism. Now, the way that these problems show themselves is going to be, well, a little bit, specific to education, right? But the underlying issues are just ones that are issues that sort of plague society at large, not just education. If you reformed education and not society, or to an extent where there's this huge disconnect between the two, then what really is the point of education if you're not educating people on the current state of society? See, you can't just change one without changing the other, at least to some extent. You have to change both. You have to change... If you change one, you inadvertently change the other to an extent. These go hand in hand. And you can't change one too much without addressing the issues of the other. Am I making sense here?
What if a kid is suffering and doesn't think that it's worth it to go to the school system for that? You could...
Yeah, that's what I used to think. But I don't even know where the fuck I would be if I wasn't forced to go to school back in the day, right? Like, I would probably be even more retarded somehow than I currently am, which is quite impressive if you ask me.
Encourage them and offer them alternatives, but we don't. Why? Let's read this. Let me just show you this real quick. Ready?
Okay, what alternatives do you propose?
Mr. Krupp was told when to eat, when to read, and when to exercise. He even had to ask permission to go to the bathroom. He was constantly bombarded with pointless rules, ridiculous discipline, random searches, metal detectors, security cameras, and pharmaceuticals designed to make everyone feel compliant and docile. It was a lot like being a student at Jerome Horowitz Elementary School, except the prison had better funding.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with this. 100,000,000%. Again, this is not fundamental to school being compulsory, right? This is literally just issues with the school system that need to be addressed, right? Again, that's, I guess, you know, okay, yeah, it'd be nice if you were able to leave, but let's say that there's only two options, and it's one of them is to live the life described in this comic. And the other one is to die of starvation on the streets. Okay, those are your two options. Which one is worse? Well, probably the one where you die, unless you willingly want to die, I guess. If you're, I guess you can make that decision. I believe in the right to end your own life. But that's a whole side tangent. I mean, I think that you should at least be 18 before you get to make that decision most of the time. Look, I don't want to make any absolute statements when, yeah, there's going to be exceptions. There are instances where I think that somebody's life can be so bad and hopeless that, okay, maybe it is a genuine thing to consider. I know that I've been there, right? And rather than being like, oh, that's something I got over, I look back at it and I'm like, well, yeah, what I was thinking made sense. It was logical. And ultimately I came to the logical conclusion to not, Roblox myself, right? But to act as if it's not, okay, we're getting sidetracked.
Damn, Captain Underpants. Damn, Captain Underpants. Whew. Whew. Now, the writer of Captain Underpants has been very critical of the school system. In fact, has written that into multiple of the books.
Very based.
Because these books are often, children in school are given these to read.
Well, yeah, and there's always going to be a disconnect between what the teachers provide versus what the actual curriculum provides, right? So it's going to be more likely to be the case that a teacher chooses that book because they're going to have the same issues, right? Teachers are going to be the ones that want to share that because it's like, yeah, those are grievances that they themselves have. Isn't this years old? Does she still believe this? See, that's the thing, is I asked her about it on Discord and she didn't respond. So I don't know if she still believes it, but again, this isn't about DemonMama as much as it is about the actual discourse. So yeah, it's more about the actual discourse at hand. So I'll read you out loud the DM I sent, okay? Today at 2:23 p.m. Hey, so I saw your take on mandatory schooling, and I was wondering if at some point you'd be willing to have a debate/discussion with me on whether or not mandatory schooling should be abolished. I agree that the current education system in this country is dog shit and needs to be fixed, but I don't agree with school being completely optional for children. I do intend on doing a stream talking about your takes on mandatory education regardless, so I thought I'd reach out to you directly first. If you're not interested, that's totally cool and I respect that. She did not respond. And she was online, so she probably just ignored it. So, I don't think she's gonna, debate me or anything like that. I don't think she cares. What What does she mean by mandatory education, like forcing people to go to school or they go to jail? Not necessarily that they go to jail, but that it's like a legal requirement that you go to school. That's literally it. How that's enforced, I guess, so it would be a different story. I mean, you could be like, well, it's good for it to be a legal requirement, but I'd rather it be enforced in this way instead of this way, but that's not what she's arguing, right? It's more about whether or not it should or shouldn't be a legal requirement in the first place, is her main, I guess, point of contention. So, yeah, let's continue.
And I just want you to just take a second and all conclusions aside, let's just put aside like policy conclusions, okay? For just one second. Imps, listen up for me for 1 second, okay? I want you to just think about something real quick, okay? So just think with me.
Okay, I'm thinking.
Engage with these problems without any necessary, like any of the baggage of having to come up with an alternative or a solution.
But I already agree that these are problems. No, I don't think anybody is disagreeing with you. But the only thing that we would disagree on is the solutions. Because some solutions might work better than others, or not at all.
Isn't it kind of fucked that we have horrific disciplinary procedures, factory conditions with lines and lines of students who have to sit in uncomfortable desks, who...
Yes, this is all bad. I agree.
Where they're told they have to humiliate themselves and ask for permission to even go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I think that's retarded. I absolutely agree. We don't disagree on that. That doesn't mean that school shouldn't be mandatory.
They have to ask for permission sometimes to get water. They're usually not allowed to eat a snack in class because that's considered bad. The rules that you have to deal with in school are wild. There's so many of them. And
Agreed. But again, this is an argument for why there should be less rules in school, right?
You get in trouble. People get in trouble all the time. Kids with ADHD, often undiagnosed ADHD and undiagnosed autism, if they act out when they're a kid, kids don't necessarily know how to deal with the things they're struggling with yet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You basically get fucked. No, I've experienced that firsthand because I have ADHD and autism. So yeah, it fucking sucks. That being said, I think what's the best way to put it? I think the best way to describe it is this. Yes, the education system is really fucking bad, but that's not ultimately what determines whether or not schooling should be compulsory, right? So even under these circumstances in which education does harm in a lot of instances, it's still better than the alternative, which is just not going to school, right? So regardless of how good or bad the education system is, unless it's somehow at a point that's worse than it currently is, if it ever gets to that point, then maybe I'll change my mind. But in terms of how bad it is right now, it's not as bad as not going to school, period, right? That being said, regardless of whether or not the education system is improved, it is still going to be preferable to get an education regardless, right? I think that we could all agree on that. That being said, it would be preferable to have a better education, perhaps a reformed system of education, I guess you could say. I know, that just makes me a complete liberal cuck instead of a base leftist / anarchist that just wants to completely abolish the school system entirely in terms of it being mandatory. But regardless of whether or not the school system has or hasn't changed, it's still preferable to not having an education, regardless. All you can do from there is improve what already exists or turn it into something else. Sure, in theory, it might be easier to start from scratch because whatever, you're creating something new. Hoo-ha, the whole world works. Everything is all perfect, right? But in the real world, you don't just get to make the school system disappear, right? You're given big stinky piece of shit to work with. But I guess the best thing you can do is, decorate the piece of shit. Make it a little bit nicer. Turn it into less of a piece of shit, Turn it into chocolate. Who fucking knows?
And yet they will be punished severely for acting out in any way. And again, we're not talking about any alternatives. I just want you to engage with the state of schooling as it is. Isn't that fucked? Even if you think that compulsory education is a good thing.
Yes, I do think it's a good thing, but I don't think that the education system is good.
Isn't it so fucked that we literally put our students in essentially prisons for 8+ hours a day?
Yes, absolutely.
8 fucking hours a day they have to go. And the only reason you have to go to school for 8 hours, even though your brain is squeezed dry, and I say this as somebody who is very good at school, after 8 hours of school, my brain can't pick up any of it. And then—
oh yeah, absolutely. There's a reason I did all my homework in class.
they give you homework that you have to do, or you get detentions, and you—
yeah, I never had that issue. I think that the teachers kind of despised— well, some of them liked me, some of them despised me. Because I could just sort of, pay attention in class, kind of, and then do the homework at the same time, or, whatever, or not at all, and then do well in the class. That's all I had to do. And, yeah, it was something that worked, I guess.
You suspensions, and you get yelled at, and people make you sit in a room all by yourself in the cold and in a comfortable table. Isn't that horrible?
Yeah, I would tend to agree that yes, it is.
And you have to do it. They take up your whole life. In high school, I remember days where I did nothing but homework. I would go to school for 8 hours. I would go home and do homework until I went to bed. Oh,
yeah, I'm somebody that just sort of stopped doing homework. Or I would do the bare minimum or whatever to get a decent grade.
Over and over and over again. And that is so bad, and it destroys the mind of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Completely destroys the mind of people. And we have all sat here and dealt with it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay?
School is gay. You are absolutely correct, Janae Rose. School is very gay. And not in a good way. Hey, Femyoz, you're my favorite femboy and Spooksy too. Why, thank you, Dark Angel. I very much appreciate that.
Detention and suspension are always full. Detention halls are always full of kids. It's so normalized. You punish—
I don't know how it works at I don't know. I mean, it's gonna be something that's different depending on the school. But I know that at least at my high school, you could just not show up to a detention and, they wouldn't do anything. That's what I always did. I just didn't show up, and see, what I did is I used the skill called plausible deniability, okay? So I guess I knew that, okay, well, there's a small chance that maybe they actually do something about it, right? So if they do something about it, I just be like, oh shit, I'm so sorry, I forgot. Because that's something I would genuinely do anyway, is forget. Because I'm autistic as shit. So, I'm just saying. Oh, okay, so she thought school shouldn't be mandatory. Gotcha. The way it is now, it's retarded. Yeah. But I think that it should be mandatory, but that it should be a completely different education system. I used to skip all week and show up on Friday and get all the missed work done in a day. I had a 3.0 GPA, never even cared. School's a joke. Yeah, no, I was kind of in the same boat, except I did show up to classes, and I got fairly good grades. I took AP classes and honors classes for the most part, and did pretty well in them, but I didn't put that much work into it, if I'm going to be totally honest. I mean, I did and I didn't. I put mental— okay, I guess I put work into it in that I put a lot of mental energy into it, but I put a lot of mental energy into, optimizing the efficiency at which I work, in that I optimized it so it would take as little time as possible to get a decent grade for each class. So I would basically just cut corners, find loopholes, etc., for how the work gets done. Just make sure that I do as little as possible while still doing a decent job in the class.
Punish them. You make them sit there for an hour after school or maybe miss their bus even. I got detention for being late. Yeah, there's a million stories like that. Okay? This is so normal. It's a part of our entertainment. Go and watch
Oh yeah, for sure.
a Nickelodeon TV show about schools. All of this shit is a part of it. It's normalized. But what I'm telling you here is, like I said, don't start thinking of alternatives yet. Don't think about policy prescriptions. I just want you to recognize the absolutely fucked situation.
But I think that everybody already agrees with you on that, right? Like, I don't think that anybody disagrees that the situation is fucked. The only thing I disagree with her on is the fact that it shouldn't be compulsory.
Fawn, would you be willing to talk about this a little bit? About what? About your experience with school and what you think about school.
I don't know.
You want to come over here and try?
Try.
Yeah.
See, here's the thing, is you can point to every single bad experience you've ever had in school. And guess what? Those are all valid. Those are all examples of the education system failing. At least for the most part, right? That doesn't mean that it shouldn't be mandatory, right? Again, these are just arguments for why there need to be certain things that are changed. That, in a way that, again, school being optional is not fundamental to making these changes. You don't have to make school optional in order to fix these issues.
Because I'd like to hear, because you're fine with me talking about it a little bit, right?
Sure.
Because you dropped out.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell people why you felt like that? Here, Fawn's going to talk about her experience firsthand. Here you go. I'm going to give it over to Fawn.
Okay.
Oh,
Here you go,
okay.
Fawn.
So, I really didn't like school growing up for
Yeah, me neither.
several reasons. The main thing was I didn't like anyone telling me what to do at all.
Oh yeah, same, absolutely. As a massive contrarian myself, I fucking despised that, and I made sure to go out of my way to walk on the fence and push the envelope as much as humanly possible. Hey Femyoz, hello Battlecrafter. It's crazy that DemonMama was able to ride so far off just being conversationally dominant. She's so bad at thinking. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think that, I don't know. She makes bad points sometimes. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, the kids who actually liked school were the worst. No, I feel like they got bullied. I don't know. Or they did for a while, and then people just stopped caring, and then it was like, whatever. Anyone with sense didn't like school. Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know. I didn't mind the people that liked school. I just didn't really have anything in common with them, so I didn't usually talk to them.
And I would go to school because number one reason I went to school was because I had been heard that they would threatened that if I didn't go to school, if I was a truant, then my mom would get in trouble. And so of course I was like, I gotta go, even though I didn't want to. And so I would sleep through classes all the time, and I did like classwork and paid attention to the teachers, and of course there were subjects I liked, but I would never do homework because I was so protective of my time outside of school. I hated
Yeah, I was absolutely the same way.
school so much that I wouldn't let them cut into it at all. Like,
Oh,
to the
yeah,
point where I
same.
was in high school, they were telling me stuff like that I had to do summer school and Saturday school, and I never showed up for any of that shit. And
Based. I'm gonna say it because nobody else will. This side of the left is so reductive. Every time a system has problems, they want to throw it away and sloppily replace it with their own shit. Capitalism, police institutions, and now school. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is I don't think you should just throw away a system, right? You want to change it into something that it's currently not, right? So for instance, I would say that I lean more towards socialism than capitalism by quite a bit, right? But my goal isn't to have some violent socialist revolution and take over the country and build a new government from scratch. It sounds so cool and, oh wow, you build something from scratch. Wow, that's awesome. But A, that's never gonna fucking happen, and B, it doesn't work as easily as you would think. So yeah, getting to a point where you'd have a stable government from that, good fucking luck. What's a better idea is take what we currently have and push it in the direction that you want it to go in. If you want socialism, That's good. I agree with you. But you don't just achieve it by trying to overthrow the government or whatever the fuck, right? You do it by advocating, because again, there's no such thing as pure socialism or pure capitalism. What you want to do is you want to advocate for actual policy positions that get us closer to socialism, right? You can't just wake up tomorrow morning and then, oh wow, we have socialism. Oh wow, everything's all... I mean, even a socialist society would be imperfect. You'd still have problems. You'd still have fucking a lot of issues that would have to be dealt with, because that's how society works. Nothing in society is going to be perfect, but you can try your best to make it as good as possible. And that's sort of where I guess I'm the ultimate cucked out centrist in that regard, between liberals and far leftists, which I guess would make me decently left and not a centrist. But relative to these positions, I guess I'd be the cucked out centrist, saying, well, why don't we just resolve our differences? Let's not do this weird, insane shit, but let's like work towards these goals and not just do nothing. You know, and then we can all be happy and resolve our differences, you know? That's my cringe centrist take for today. Like, these things can be fixed. Oh yeah, absolutely. Any super extreme ideologies are insane. We got to work within the reality we have to make things better. Well, the problem isn't extremism necessarily. Extremism just refers to the magnitude of something, right? You could be extremely in favor of trans rights, and that would be a good kind of extremism, right? Whereas you could be extremely far right, and that would be a bad kind of extremism, right? Or you could be an extremist tanky, which would also be a bad kind of extremism. Again, not all forms of extremism are made equal. You can also be an extreme centrist, for instance, where your goal is to stay as close to the center of the Overton window at all times as possible, right? That would technically be an extremist position. It just wouldn't be a very logical one that many people would have, though there are some people that inadvertently have it for whatever fucking reason. They have relativistic positions on everything and flip-flop and don't actually believe anything, but again, side tangent, so let's continue.
And
You ended up dropping out, right?
Sort of.
They drove
yes.
you out of the school system.
Yeah, by 11th grade, I had some gaps in my learning, and so I could not understand the math classes they put me in, but I was fine with everything else. But by that point, I'd become way disillusioned with it. All of my friends from school had either dropped out themselves or were older than me, and so they'd all graduated, and so I just didn't feel like there was any reason to keep going. But of course, I didn't want to completely leave school, and obviously there was still the truancy thing. So I was going to go to an online school, but my birth certificate had not been updated, and it was this like tiny little pocket one that you could get in the 90s, but are not valid anymore. And so they said, oh, this isn't a real birth certificate, and so they wouldn't let me in.
Which is obviously fucking stupid and bullshit, right? But again, this has nothing to do with school being compulsory.
For classes for the year, and then I was like,
and then
screw it.
You gave up.
Yep,
They literally wouldn't let you go to school even when you tried to, because you didn't do it in the right way. See, this is the thing that I'm talking about. Thank you for that. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you for being willing to.
Aww.
I really do appreciate that. Yeah. I'll continue my rant. I was hoping that Fawn would come in and we could talk about this, because Fawn has a very first-hand experience with it. I liked school when I was younger. I was good at school, and I still have a lot of trauma associated with school. And now,
which I think is perfectly valid.
You can see what happens if you don't have the perfect experience with school. They literally drive you out of it. They drive you into the margins. And keep in mind that if you have like a learning struggle or something like that, or if you have a trouble at home, there's no special education programs. There's no teachers available to teach you.
Yeah, well, obviously that's partially going to depend on which school you go to specifically, but yeah, generally that's I don't necessarily disagree.
It's so messed up.
Agreed.
Okay, So now that we've sat here and we've sort of sat with it and we understand that the school system is incredibly fucked, okay? The school system is totally messed up, and it's actually really sad and sickening, the shit that we do to kids, okay? Now let's talk about the compulsory aspect, okay? Let's talk about the compulsory aspect. So we can acknowledge that this school system is totally fucked. And
I absolutely agree.
In fact, we can also acknowledge, I didn't even talk about the school-to-prison pipeline, which the school-to-prison pipeline has been discussed by prison abolitionists all over the fucking planet.
Again, this has nothing to do with whether or not school should be compulsory.
The school-to-prison pipeline, for those of you who don't know what the school-to-prison pipeline is, the school-to-prison pipeline is the idea that basically schools, like specifically inner-city and low underfunded schools, are basically designed to be a holding period until you can get in trouble, until the people inside of them get in trouble and then can be put in prison, where they will...
Again, this has nothing to do with school being compulsory.
Do slave labor. Well, they will do labor for free, either for the state or for private prisons. And what this talks about is basically schools that have no chance, like almost no chance of success. You go to the school, the teachers are underfunded, everything's broken.
So again, this would be an argument for funding schools in poorer areas more than they currently do. Again, this has nothing to do with whether or not going to school as a child should be mandatory. I don't think that not going to school would decrease the chances of somebody going to prison, right?
The conditions are horrible, the food is bad, and so people act out. And then those schools have police officers on site. And if you act out, if you get in a fight, if you conflict with your teacher, you get charged by the in-school police officer. And then you have it on your record, and that means you can't get a job. And so you turn to crime, and then you end up in prison. That's the school-to-prison pipeline. And this is something that has been well documented, okay?
Is she implying this is by design? That sounds like a conspiracy theory. I think she's trying to say that, like, this is, or at least I'm going to be charitable and assume that she means, like, this is what the outcomes of the design are, right? It's not, because I don't even think it's relevant if that's, like, the intention. Like, that's just what the design does, right? I think that's sort of her point. I went to alternate schools gang because I got expelled and arrested a bunch growing up. School to prison pipeline, real AF. Oh yeah, absolutely. I do think that pipeline exists. Whether it exists intentionally or not, I guess would be up for debate. I think that it shouldn't exist, but that there are people that don't, people in power that don't want to prevent it or actively encourage it, right? But I don't think that was, like, the original design, as far as I'm aware. Also, how fucking stupid, like, why would you want your population to be in prison, free labor? Wouldn't you want them to be free, working jobs, participating in the economy? It makes no sense. I guess I mean, I'm not sure. I think that this isn't as important of a point to the overall proposition. I don't think it's relevant to whether or not, going to school should be mandatory when you're growing up. Again, I don't know. I think it's a side point. I don't want to get too hung up on it.
I'm not done yet. I'm not done quite yet, Music Combo. Hold on for a second, okay? Detention is always full of black, indigenous people of color, and queer kids. Always. Every single time. And neurodivergent people. The autistic people, the ADHD people, all end up in detention. And it's...
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but I would also need to see some statistical data to back this up. Because I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if this was the case, but I'm not sure.
Funny how that works, isn't it? Because it's so easy for struggling to be mistaken as obstruction or bad behavior.
I almost agree with her, but I guess it would be less to do with struggling in of itself and more to do with the way in which that struggle is expressed outwardly. So it could be the case that somebody is struggling and as a result they lash out, right? It wouldn't be that they're struggling that would cause them to get in trouble. It would be them lashing out. Now, the solution to that wouldn't just be taking a bunch of punitive measures, right? It would be to prevent them from getting to the point where they feel the need to lash out in the first place, right? That would be the point, right?
or whatever. And so they slam you in detention, and then that goes on your record, and you can't get out of it. Notice that you have a school record. You have a record, a transcript that carries your punitive actions against you. It ruins your future in addition to your present. So all of this.
I believe that these are the outcomes that do happen. I don't think that they're necessarily intended, but I don't think that that even necessarily is relevant.
All of this is why I say that it's wrong for it to be compulsory, okay?
Okay, but these are not reasons for why it shouldn't be compulsory. It not being compulsory doesn't fix these issues. These issues still take place. Again, you haven't offered any alternatives. In fact, you specifically avoided it. But now you're saying that this is why it shouldn't be compulsory. Oh, so let's just have it not be compulsory, and then everything will magically fix itself. And that will magically unfuck the education system.
Okay? A system this fucked, no one should be forced to participate in.
But you have to keep in mind that the system of capitalism, of late-stage capitalism, is one that we are all forced to participate in. So unless we can stop being forced to participate in that system, we can't stop being forced to participate in the education system, right? Because at that point, you're just being done a disservice if you're not, I don't know, given an education, basically. If you're allowed, as a literal fucking child who doesn't know any better, to say, well, school's boring, so I'm just not going to go. I agree, school's boring and that it's not good. But again, they're still going to have to live in a capitalist society when they grow up. So the whole point of education would be to prepare them for that. And at the end of the day, regardless of whether or not that's good or not, that's ultimately what you need in order to, well, have a job in order to survive. Again, what's being described here are broader societal issues, but they're being, but it's in the framework of only the education system, not how it interacts with society at large.
I do not care if it technically decreases crime rates. I do not care if it if technically on a numerical level it reduces child labor or something like that. The system shouldn't be compulsory. There are other ways to answer those other issues that don't involve forcing people to go into a disgustingly flawed institution.
Okay, like what? What would cause, again, what would an example of, like, how often is it going to be the case that the education system, let's say that education isn't compulsory. How often is it going to be the case that the child chooses to not go out and get an education and that is to the benefit of the child? How often is that going to happen? And if it's not about the child's autonomy and it's, well, the parents are the ones that decide, well, then the child's autonomy is irrelevant in that case. And then what you end up with is you end up with Christian fundamentalist freaks as parents that make decisions on behalf of their children and say, no, you're not going to go to school. No, you're not going to get vaccinated, etc. In which case, the state should step in and say, no, your kid needs an education, so we're not going to allow that. And we also don't want them to die of sickness that's preventable, so they're getting vaccinated. And if you don't like that, then go fuck yourself. Actually, I just realized, ironically, lower education correlates with crime. Why would you want a school to be mandatory if you want your population to be enslaved in prison? Yeah, exactly. Like, you're not going to end up with a lower proportion of the population in prison if you make school non-compulsory. Because then you're just going to have less job opportunities if you don't have a high school diploma, in which case you're going to have more incentive to, you're going to have more of an incentive structure to just commit crimes in order to make money or get food or whatever in that way.
That doesn't even do what it says it does. Everybody says that schools are about learning, but they're...
No, not everybody says that. There are people like me that say, no, you learn some stuff, but, I mean, it's not just learning. Again, you go there to learn, but that's not the only thing that's there, I guess.
Not about learning. If schools were about learning, we wouldn't need these giant grading systems. We wouldn't need permanent transcripts.
So, I don't think that most people that I guess the transcripts would have a permanent effect if it determines what college or colleges you can go to, which determines which colleges you can graduate from, which determines which jobs you can get, and I guess in that sense it would be permanent. But if somebody's hiring you, they're probably not going to be looking beyond the fact that, oh yeah, this person basically had a high school diploma and then maybe they went to college, right? They're not going to be looking at oh, they didn't do well in fucking in their junior year of English class. Like they don't give a shit. So I don't like the framing of this. You would need a grading system because how the fuck would you know if a student is learning if they're failing? Yeah, well, I think that what she's trying to criticize here is like the way things are graded, or like the way that because I guess it has more to do with like standardized testing and exams and whatnot, right? I think that I guess a better way to frame it would be not necessarily that grading in of itself is a fundamentally bad concept and that it shouldn't be allowed to exist in any classes. I guess a better framing would be different things should be graded and in different ways that are more fair to the students. But again, like unless you can replace it with something better, then I don't know what the fuck the point is of saying it's bad. It's like, yeah, I know it's bad, but you haven't come up with anything better. That's why my analysis is better than DemonMama's, because I can take things that already exist and innovate. I can make them better than they currently are, as opposed to just being like, nope, that's bad. We need something else. What that thing is some weird nebulous thing that I can't actually articulate or describe at all. But just trust me, there's a better system that I just haven't described yet. But I'm not gonna say what it is. Let's just focus on how bad the system currently is, as if people don't already fucking know that.
That it's not about learning. It's about equipping you so that you can get a job. That's what schools are about.
Wait, yes, I agree with that. But what is the alternative? Not getting a job? Yes, the point is to equip you to be able to get a job so that you don't live on the streets and fucking die. Yes, that is the point. What is the alternative? Again, like, at this point, you're not even criticizing the education system.
No mistake. That is the only thing that schools are actually about. They're not about learning. If it was about learning, we would do things very differently. Tests wouldn't matter because it would be about making sure that you understood the knowledge, not what...
Okay, and how do you make sure that somebody understands the knowledge? Do you test them on their knowledge, perhaps? Is that something that could potentially be the case? Again, I'm not saying that the way testing currently works or that the way we test knowledge in schools is good or even acceptable. I don't think that it's at an acceptable standard. But again, it's not that there's an... Again, how would you know how much somebody is learning unless you have some way of testing their knowledge or their ability? Whether it be through having them do some sort of creative project related to the subject material or whatever the fuck. It doesn't matter. You need some sort of way to verify that, yes, people have learned stuff.
What points you get. They teach kids to comply, to memorize, and to build an obedience regimen.
That is true, and I agree that there is an overemphasis on that a lot of the time, but...
That's what they do. They teach you to be obedient and to do the things you're told. That is what you were taught to do. And then you build a resume so you can go to your job where you will be obedient and do what you are told.
Well, yeah, that again, this is just another example of school reflecting the outside world and society at large. So this wouldn't be a criticism of school, which is supposed to simply reflect society at large. This would be a criticism of society at large. If you don't like that the way if you don't like the way society currently operates, that's fine. And I agree with you. But again, you're failing to account for the fact that school has to reflect a capitalist society because it functions in a capitalist society. If you don't want to have a school system that functions as if it's preparing you to live in a capitalist society, then you can't have it operate in a capitalist society in the first place.
That is the job of schools.
The job of schools is to reflect reality, to reflect real life. Again, if there's a problem with real life, then that's what needs to change first in a lot of instances. You can't just have school prepare you for some sort of socialist utopia where you have a say and shit, but then in real life you don't. That doesn't make any sense. Again, you would have to change both of them.
And with all of that in mind, why on earth, what possible justification do we have for making that compulsory?
Because the alternative is worse. You haven't presented me with a better alternative. Funny you mention projects being a better way of grading knowledge. Almost all of my college classes emphasize that projects matter more than tests. Yes, abso-fucking-lutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. Again, it's not necessarily perfect, but it is a better measurement for how you can actually apply that knowledge. So that's something that colleges do better than regular old high schools and middle schools and especially fucking elementary schools, which are horrid. They're the fucking worst.
What fucking justification could anybody come up with for that being compulsory?
Projects are better than tests, but relying on projects without the context of tests is a bad world to live in? Not necessarily. It's going to depend on what the projects are. And again, tests shouldn't be the end-all be-all. Like, again, projects are just one of many ways of testing knowledge. It doesn't have to just be projects and tests, right? There are many, like, I was just coming up with, like, an example of something you could do that isn't a standardized multiple choice test or whatever the fuck, right? There's so many possible ways of testing whether or not any given student has learned something. And I think that it would be better if students were given the option, depending on what their learning style is, depending on how they are able to demonstrate their abilities. So, for instance, I believe that, let's say that there's a test, and there's a big, scary test, and a lot of people don't have the best test-taking abilities. So, maybe they should have the option to do a project instead, like a more of like a long-term, okay, do this over the course of the next 2 weeks, and if you do that, we'll grade that instead of the test. If you don't do it, if you don't feel like putting all that time and effort into a project and you think you can ace the test and you understand the material well, you can also do that. I think that there should be instances in which that's the case, because then it also plays to people's strengths. There are so many ways that you can correct the flaws of the education system without saying, let's make it optional, which would do what? Mean that there's less people filling the seats, so the school would probably get less funding on average, which benefits who exactly? Not really anybody.
You may as well say that we should have compulsory 4-year prison sentences so that everybody knows what it's like to be in prison, because that might reduce the crime rate. You want to slam kids into prison so that they...
But the goal of school isn't necessarily to reduce the crime rate, and also being educated does reduce your likelihood of committing crime as an adult. So, yeah, it actually does reduce crime rate. I don't think that there's any statistical evidence to suggest that forcing people to go to prison for 4 years, like actual prison, not learning anything, would have that same effect. Like mandatory prison time, if it's the same kind of prison that everybody else goes to when they commit crimes, then no, it would actually be the opposite. Because prison has the issue of very high recidivism rates. Again, a lot of that's going to have to do with prison culture and the way that it's structured.
They get the prison experience so they know not to commit crimes in the future. Seems pretty bad to me.
Yeah, except the difference there is that would actually increase the statistical likelihood of them committing crimes. I'm 99.99% sure that that would be the case. Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but I'm pretty sure that mandatory prison time like that would increase crime rates, not decrease them, whereas education and actual schooling decreases the crime rates. DemonMama should be focusing on prison rehabilitation reform programs instead of trying to go for a mandatory prison sentence. No. She's just using that as like a comparison to like she's doing a reducto ad absurdum. She's not actually saying that there should be a 4-year mandatory prison sentence.
You're opposed to compulsory education because the current implementation of schooling is so royally fucked. Do I have that right? Yes, because
again, you can agree, but the school system currently being royally fucked does not indicate that compulsory schooling is necessarily bad as a fundamental concept. Again, if school does more good for the average person than bad, if they are forced to go out of the proportion of people that would choose as children to not go, then I think it should be the case that it would serve more utility for schooling to be compulsory. Like, that's just basic logic and reasoning.
I don't think that people should be forced to do things that they don't want to do.
Wow, what an incredible quote from DemonMama. I don't think people should be forced to do things that they don't want to do. Boy, if only life were that simple. She's literally throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Ever. But especially when we can acknowledge that the entire system is completely fucked, and for the near future, there is no guarantee that it's going to get any better.
Okay, so what do you think you could do to make it better? Do you think that saying that it should be optional is going to make it better? Because I can assure you it's not.
So why on earth should we compel people? Why should we compel people to do something that we know is so wrong?
Because it ultimately benefits them? Like, just in general? Like, you can acknowledge that, yeah, the way the education system currently operates is wrong, while still acknowledging the fact that even with that being the case, it is still preferable for most children, specifically those that don't want to go to school regardless and get an education.
Isn't that weird? It's normalized. And we haven't even gotten into alternatives yet, or anything else.
Yeah, you haven't come up with a single alternative.
Wasn't it made compulsory to combat child labor? Yes, it was. But I have a quick question for you, okay? Real quick. Wasn't it made
Wow, it's almost as if it opens up job opportunities that aren't child labor. Wow, incredible.
Compulsory to combat child labor? Yes. You want to know what you could do? You want to know what you could do to combat child labor that would be more effective than compulsing school at actually addressing that? Give money to the people who are having to put their kids in child labor. Go.
These aren't mutually exclusive?
Find out why the fuck families are so poor that they have to have their kids work.
Okay, but when people have an education, they're more likely to provide for the economy, right? Otherwise, why the fuck would there be public education, right? That the state is going to operate in that way. DemonMama would acknowledge this, I know for a fact. And because we would both acknowledge this, you have to keep in mind that it would also make logical sense to say, for instance, give money to these families, but where does that money come from? Well, it's an investment because their kids are getting an education instead of being child laborers. And because they're getting an education, they are ultimately going to output more into the economy than they otherwise would. So again, think of it as like an investment. Again, I'm not saying that it's perfect or that it's even good necessarily in terms of the way we currently do things, but I feel like you should at least understand the idea behind it and understand that not only are these not mutually exclusive, but they would go hand in hand.
And 2, arrest the capitalists who are hiring children. Why the fuck would you put the compulsory aspect? If you're going to use the violence of the state, why would you use it to put kids into a building, to make them go there? The kids who've done nothing wrong, force them to do something they don't want to do. Why?
Because again, you haven't presented an alternative that's better. What do you prefer? They get homeschooled? I would hope not.
While you don't alleviate the poverty, while you allow the capitalists to walk free.
Again, these aren't mutually exclusive. You can alleviate poverty while also having compulsory schooling. Like, why are these mutually exclusive? This is just whataboutism. Well, mandatory schooling is bad. Why do you need... Well, why would you make schooling compulsory when you could give money to poor people instead? These are not... these aren't mutually... these aren't at odds with each other.
An absence of an alternative? Hold on a second. Let me ask you something real quick. Let me just ask people who are sitting here, and we're not there yet. We're going to talk about alternatives.
Good. I've been waiting.
We're going to talk about some alternatives in a minute. But before we talk about alternatives, I am about to just blow your minds. Hey guys,
okay.
What? You think we should just free the slaves? Well, how the hell are we going to do the cotton then?
Well, the difference there is that freeing slaves actually benefits the slaves. Making it so that schooling is no longer compulsory doesn't benefit the children that choose not to go to school. In fact, the vast majority of the time, it would negatively impact them. So that would be the main difference there, right? That's the symmetry breaker. That's why it's a false equivalency.
How the hell are we going to get all the cotton? You think we should just get rid of it without something to replace it? Don't seem...
Or you could just... Well, no, the obvious solution there would just be paying people to do it instead of having slaves. And also, again, the main difference there that acts as a symmetry breaker isn't even that. It's also the fact that it would benefit the slaves to be freed. So, yeah, okay.
Seem so smart now, do you? As it turns out, you don't always need to have an alternative on hand to fight against something that is absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, well, this sounds really fucking stupid considering the fact that I already proved why it's a false equivalency.
You don't. You do not have to go, oh yeah, I want to have, I want to have the life set.
You're saying that compulsory schooling should be abolished. That is a statement of what ought to happen. That's not just you saying that school system bad, okay? I agree, school system bad, but you made a proposition. You gave your quote-unquote solution to the school system being bad. You literally said, and this is why schooling shouldn't be compulsory after listing legitimate grievances with the school system. So you gave that as your solution, but that solution doesn't work. It's okay, you make it not compulsory. Then what? What the fuck happens then? Do you think that it's just gonna magically fix itself? Do you think that it's gonna magically make everything better and improve the amount of funding that goes to schools? No, fuck no. If anything, it'll do the opposite.
Sentence brigade instead of the death sentence brigade. You can just say the death sentence brigade is bad.
Yeah, and you can just say that the schooling system is bad without making a prescriptive claim about how it ought to not be compulsory. Again, you are conflating a descriptive claim saying that the way it currently is bad, right? The same way that, if there was slavery, the way it currently is would be bad if there was slavery, as opposed to making a prescriptive claim about the way things ought to be. There ought not be slavery. There ought to be a better education system, right? The quality of the education system is not contingent upon whether or not it's compulsory. This is a complete logical fallacy. Like her entire argument here is built off of nothing but a logical fallacy.
DemonMama. Hold on 1 second. DemonMama. But if school is compulsory, how do you separate kids from parents to keep an eye on abuse? What the fuck? Who said it's the state's job to keep an eye on abuse? That should be up to fucking communities. What are you fucking
Okay, and what if the communities don't do anything? Which is what would happen. Again, this is an example of, hey, it would be nice if our culture shifted in this way. That would be beneficial and served utility, but that's not the society we currently live in. So if we were to, I don't know, abolish compulsory schooling, you wouldn't magically have this sudden cultural shift that solves this issue. Again, this is the problem with DemonMama. You just assume that, oh yeah, everything's just gonna magically work out. But she's wrong. It doesn't just magically work out. The culture doesn't just magically fix itself and get rid of all of its flaws. That's not how it works.
talking about? What the fuck? Since when should it be the state's job to separate children from their parents? What the fuck kind of...
Since parents have been abusive? Again, you can't just rely on communities of people to do stuff that they don't already do in a situation in which compulsory schooling is abolished. If the only variable that's changed is compulsory schooling gets abolished, that's not gonna fucking work. Because, and that would be one of the reasons. So again, you would have to open 5 trillion other cans of worms, and obviously she's not gonna do that, so instead she's like, oh, well, in the society in which it's abolished, in which compulsory schooling no longer exists, everything else is also perfect. So we actually live in this socialist utopia already, and then that's when school gets abolished. But at that point, we're not even dealing with it with reality. Why even make claims about the way things currently are? At that point, just say, oh, it would be nice if school didn't fucking suck, regardless of whether or not it's compulsory, in which case I would agree.
Do you see the level of... Okay, I got made fun of for sounding like an MGS villain for saying that we live in a panopticon society. We do live in a panopticon society, and that proves it. The idea that you think this...
Am I retarded for not knowing what the word panopticon means? Am I fucking stupid for that? Or is it one of those words where it's like everybody else knows it, but like I'm like the only person that doesn't? I've had that happen a few times. It's like, wow, I have a pretty extensive vocabulary, but then occasionally someone will say something that everybody else knows, and it's like, oh shit.
State should be separating every parent from every child just because there's a risk of abuse. Guess what? The state intervened in my life on multiple occasions and still didn't do jack shit.
Okay, so this would be an argument for them doing more. You're complaining that the state shouldn't be the one intervening, and then you go on to complain that the state didn't do enough to intervene. Well, which one is it, DemonMama? Did they do too much, or did they not do enough? You tell me.
Nothing. They couldn't do anything about me being in a cult.
So then, yeah, this would be an example of why the state would need to be able to do more. Because obviously the community isn't going to do shit.
Even though they were involved, even though I went to compulsory schooling, didn't even fucking matter. It doesn't matter.
Well, guess what? It would be even more fucking difficult to remove you from that situation if you didn't have compulsory schooling. Not to mention the fact that you were forced to go to a Christian conservative school. So, if you're forced to go to a Christian conservative school, then yeah, no fucking shit. But again, this would be an argument against religious schools. Against being able to force your kids to go to a religious school. And force them into believing in the same dumb fuck delusional worldview that you believe in as the parent. And allow them to come to their conclusions on their own. Without forcing religion upon them.
The way that if you want to defeat abuse, you have to encourage robust communities. You have to encourage a model like it takes a village.
Yeah, you can do that without schooling not being compulsory. Like, schooling can still be compulsory, and you can still encourage that. These aren't mutually exclusive. But of course, it's like she's dug herself this hole where it's like, okay, well, in a world where schooling is no longer compulsory, here's all of these other things that need to change that haven't changed and won't change within the next 500 fucking years. And, but yeah, no, like, if those things did change, then it would work.
It does take a village to raise a child. Do you know why they say it takes a village? Because guess what? Sometimes the town drunkard has a kid, and then it's up to the uncle Daniel, okay? The bachelor, the guy who's staying in
Yeah, and how often does that happen? How often?
your town and who's become a part of your culture, and Uncle Daniel has to go, dude, I'm sorry your dad's a drunk. Come over and hang out at my place, okay? And
Yeah, that would be great if that actually fucking happened in our society. It doesn't. Again, it would be better if that were the case, but again, you can't pretend like that would be the case if compulsory schooling stopped being a thing. You would still have the same society, but without compulsory schooling. Like, again, this whole idea of just like remove, like, if we take society and then remove all of the variables that I don't like and replace them, then society would be good. Yeah, but you have to keep in mind that sometimes you have to replace variables or change them chronologically. You can't do it all at once. You can't just remove compulsory schooling and in a society in which, you know, if society was so perfect that it doesn't matter, or sorry, if society was so good that schooling no longer being compulsory would either have a neutral or positive impact, society would be so perfect it wouldn't even matter if compulsory schooling existed or not. It wouldn't fucking matter if it was compulsory. Literally would make no difference.
And then that person can be a surrogate parent. That's a million times better than having a robotic and distanced and alienated state entity go,
Wait, these aren't mutually exclusive. You do realize that, right?
we must separate your children to confirm that the abuse is not in a direction that is convenient to us. Keep in mind that the state is perfectly fine when the abuse is in a direction they favor. They're perfectly fine with children being indoctrinated into hyper-militaristic families.
No, and I agree with that. Or more specifically, the example I always bring up is religious fundamentalist freaks that have kids. You know, unfortunately, they reproduce and indoctrinate their children with the same delusions that they believe in. That's a problem. That's a bad thing. We don't want that. That is a detriment to society. That only does harm. That doesn't do good. So it would be nice if the state prevented that.
They're perfectly okay with families who send their kids away to JROTC and all of these other things. Perfectly fine. So at the end of this, okay, cool. Then I agree. One thing, Music Combo says, one thing I'd like to share with you is not only whenever I teach, but when I talk to people, I always explain why I tell people no. My plan
That's good.
is to tell every class I teach they have the absolute right to call me out loud if I ever tell someone no, that's wrong, or no, I'm not going to let you do that, without explaining why I said no. Your thoughts?
Based.
That sounds fantastic. I think that's a really good way to encourage critical thinking. I really do.
Absolutely.
Now, some people like JROTC, and that's fine.
Wait, hold on. This would be an example of something that you could do as a teacher to make school a better environment for the students. This has nothing to do with whether or not school is compulsory, once again.
That's fine. But notice that when you're put into and by the way, JROTC is indoctrination. I'm sorry, it just is. You all need to grapple with that. Those of you who don't think that the military indoctrinates you, it is. It is identical to cult indoctrination.
Okay. Also, hello, Basil Plushie, long time no seen. Hello, and welcome to the stream. And if you guys have made it this far, and you've been enjoying what you're seeing, make sure to let me know by smashing like. It is always very much appreciated. If you really like the stream and you really want to let me know, feel free to donate. Streamlabs link is in the pinned message and in the description below on YouTube, and it's also in the pinned message on Kick. So, yeah. Regardless, I'm gonna pull a Hassan. The reason being, I really need to fucking pee. So, yeah. Be right back. Sorry for pulling a Hassan. I know. Happens to the best of us. I'll be back and I'll give 5 trillion more hours of commentary. after I'm back, so don't worry.
It is identical. How do you deal with harmful communities? Harmful communities are very hard to deal with. They're difficult to deal with. And the answer, there is not a single answer. There is not a single answer to that. At what age, then, do you propose that kids can nope out of school? Do they need parental approval? Okay, look, this is something that I encountered. There is, no, that was not. I already said that. Aztec, that was in the original post. That was in the original post. Yeah, you got a little cough going on there. Fucking hitting the bong too hard. Let me show you this. Let me show you this real quick. I'm going to show you a post that I had. Because I wanted to talk about this real quick. Let me see if I can find this post real quick. Gayfesh says, a married couple I'm friends with both work for their local school district. One is a janitor and one is a counseling administrator. And I was having dinner with them and they commented it's super weird how they teach everyone at the district to be on the lookout for warning signs of grooming. But then we have the military recruiter sitting there with us in the cafeteria. Isn't that fucking weird? Isn't that fucking weird? Okay, hold on. I wanted to talk about this. Let me see if I can find the actual message that I did. Here we go. This was what, I was having a conversation on Twitter and this is what happened, okay? Real quick. Somebody said, I said, I'll just show you the conversation here, whatever. Here we go. I'm going to show you the conversation here. By the way, this person was in good faith, so, like, I'm not roasting this person. I think coercion is generally a bad way of doing things, especially dealing with children. Learning is something I think we can all recognize as a good thing, but we shouldn't impose it coercively. Oh, shit, I need to change. Okay, hold on, let me change off that. Hold on. There we go. Oops.
Okay, so, right off the bat, what the fuck does... Okay, yeah, military people being at school somehow equivalent to, like, actual, like, child grooming? You know, like, what like, actual child predation? Now, I'm not gonna say that, oh, well, you can't be groomed into stuff like that. Okay, sure, but let's not pretend like this is, like, a fair comparison to make, first of all. Secondly, what was the tweet that was being read? Oh, right, the one where, it shouldn't be, coercive, or whatever the fuck. The unfortunate thing is that that's ultimately what produces the better outcome in comparison to not being coercive, because, again, if you don't coerce children into going to school, what you end up with is, well, less people that are educated, which ultimately leads to a larger proportion of the population that has more negative outcomes in their life as a whole, right? So consequentially, it is a negative thing for it to not be compulsory. So, yeah, let's continue.
Just chatting. Sorry about that. I forgot to change over my subject. Let me do that real quick. Okay, so anyway, let's continue. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Natalie Murray. Appreciate that. I think we could easily inspire students to willingly learn without compulsion. I believe that, and we'll talk about that. In teenage...
Well, I believe that compulsory schooling and inspiring students aren't mutually exclusive. It could be the case that they're inspired regardless of whether or not it's compulsory. Like, whether or not it's compulsory won't even be relevant.
Teenage students, maybe. On a 6-year-old? No way. How much coercion is necessary with a 6-year-old? I have never seen a parent have to fight with a 6-year-old to basically do anything, and I was the oldest of 7 kids.
Okay, that's fucking stupid, alright? I was a fucking... And maybe this is just me, but I was a problematic child. What gender are you again? I have dementia. Well, I'm basically a trans girl at this point. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. But if you... some people still think I'm a femboy, and you know what? I kind of am. But, yeah, I don't know. I think there's more to it than that. I mean, I've been on HRT for a while, and blah, blah, blah. You get the point. But yeah, no, 6-year-olds misbehave all the fucking time. Like, okay, maybe you didn't as a 6-year-old, but I sure as hell did. You think that I willingly went to school as a 6-year-old? Fuck no. I had some of the worst fucking behavior. Like, I don't understand, like, I have never seen a parent have to fight with a 6-year-old, or does that say 8? Yeah, 6. To do anything. That's just a straight up lie. What? 6-year-olds misbehave all the time. What? Do 6-year-olds not throw temper tantrums? And scream and shout? All the fucking time? Was that just me? Was that just a me thing? Maybe it was. I don't know.
6-year-olds are generally curious outside of small mood outbursts here and there. You don't have to
Small mood outbursts? Oh, believe me, I had a lot more than just small mood outbursts.
force them. They want to listen. Most kids want to listen to their parents. If their
No, I fucking didn't. When I was a child, I was a contrarian as like a fucking 5-year-old, okay? I've been a contrarian for as long as I can fucking remember. Okay, I don't want to hear this bullshit. Oh yeah, kids love listening to their parents. No, I've always hated being told what to do. Especially when I was a small child. You know what I hated more than anything? Was the level of condescension that adults would treat me with when I was that age. That was the fucking worst. It's like they assumed that I was like retarded and unable to think for myself. Yet those same people, I was fucking smarter than them. I was smarter than them, and I knew I was smarter than them. So, and I don't mean in terms of like, what knowledge do I have of the world? I mean in terms of fluid intelligence, logical thinking abilities, etc. That being said, that doesn't mean that, because that's the thing, is I was smart in terms of fluid intelligence, but I was still a fucking child. So what I didn't have, despite being a smart kid, was real world experience. And because I didn't have any real world experience, I didn't have a full understanding of how the world actually operates, then, well, I wouldn't have gone to school because the entire reasoning behind why I had to go to school is because it's what people told me to do, and I fucking hated it. It's like, and I'd be like, well, why? It's like, well, because you learn stuff. Well, what do I need this information for? Well, it's so that you use it in the future when you go to middle school. Okay, well, what the fuck do I do in like? What is that for? What do I get out of that? Well, it's so you can do well in high school. Okay, well, what the fuck do I get out of that? Well, it's so that you can go to college, so that you can get a job that you totally won't fucking hate and make money and not die on the fucking streets. And I'm like, okay, so it's basically because of this thing that's extremely fucking detached from where I am currently. So I don't give a fuck about it because it's so detached from where I am currently that it basically doesn't fucking matter. Who knows? Maybe I'm dead by then. Who cares? And at that point, it's like, okay, so hold on. Me learning this pointless bullshit that I don't need to know and following all of these retarded, useless rules that you have arbitrarily decided should be followed is somehow gonna fucking help me make money in the future. Bull fucking shit. I don't buy it. It just sounds like a convenient excuse. And again, I was partially correct. But that doesn't mean that my judgment was impeccable. It doesn't mean it was flawless. Sure, it was good for a 5-year-old, but I was still a fucking 5-year-old. My judgment wasn't perfect. My judgment would have led me to believe that there was no point in school, and that I may as well just stay home all day, and that the only reason in reality that I'm at school is because I'm forced to be. That was me as a 5 and 6-year-old. Again, you have to keep in mind that a 5 and 6-year-old is not necessarily going to make the right decision, even if they're really fucking smart, because they don't have actual real-world experience. Even if they're smarter than the people that make decisions for them, which, believe me, I fucking was, that doesn't mean that they're good decision makers. In fact, that's one of the things that I struggle with now, is decision making, because I never really improved at it. I did and I didn't. I improved at it in terms of experience I've had, but I didn't, it's never something I've excelled at, right? It's more along the lines of something that I've sort of had to kind of do sort of vaguely, But again, fluid intelligence and decision-making abilities aren't necessarily always going to go hand in hand, surprisingly enough. They can, but only sometimes.
Parents say, hey, kid, it's
And believe me, I've had to learn that the hard way, right?
time for school. Then they'll go. You don't.
No, I fucking didn't. I was forced to as a child.
Who fucking has to force a 6-year-old to go to school? And if that's
My parents did. Who has to force a 6-year-old to go to school? My own fucking parents. Are you serious?
the case, why? I would ask why.
I don't know. But at the end of the day, even if it has something to do with the education system being dog shit, that doesn't automatically mean that it would have been the correct decision for me to make as a fucking 6-year-old. Are you serious?
You're trusting that a, for example, 15-year-old has a better idea of what education they'll need to attain future goals than adults. The school system absolutely needs to be reformed, but you can get your GAD at 16. How much younger do you think they should be able to leave? Listen, I don't think that we should compulse them to go to school. That doesn't mean that you let go and just say, fuck off, whatever. Parents still have a responsibility to guide and take care of their children. But I have to ask the question, why? Why would the child be so opposed to this thing if it's so universally good? And
the point isn't that it's universally good, it's that it's better than the alternative. There's a clear distinction there. At no point have I ever argued that the school system is universally good.
I don't think they are universally good. I think these kids know that they're agonizing experiences and they have a right to say, Jesus fucking Christ.
Yes, I absolutely, and that's what I did. But it's still better long term that I had to go to school anyway. Because even though I had valid fucking reasons, more than most, because look, I mean, I might be a retarded adult, but I was actually a pretty smart kid. So I had more reasons than most to fucking despise the education system. Because I was also autistic as shit. Had all these fucking sensory issues. Had issues with complying with authority. I've always fucking despised the concept of people having authority over me. Unless it's in the bedroom, then it's kind of hot. But other than that, okay? If it's not in the bedroom, you shouldn't have authority over me, okay? Plain and simple. Unless I personally give it to you, okay? If I allow you to have that authority, then fine.
And that's the problem that I have, is that there's all this talk about compulsing people to do things, and we can't even agree that it's a good thing. Imagine this, okay? Ready? Are we ready for our chat? Are we all ready for the alternatives? Are we ready to hear some of my suggested alternatives from the
Yes, I'm so excited.
political edutainer on the internet? And these aren't lock-solid alternatives, but they're just to get you thinking about it, to get you to undo that programming that tells you that school is exactly what we need. We need more compulsory education. Everybody needs to be a worker bee, okay? Here
No, we don't need more compulsory education. We need better compulsory education and more funding for compulsory education.
we go. Watch this. Imagine, what if
I'm imagining.
we had traditional public schooling available, not compulsory, available, and students could choose to go as frequently as they desired. And
Okay, so if they decide to go every other week, how much are they going to learn? They're going to get behind, and then they're not going to want to go at all. If it's a math class. Again, this doesn't fucking, this doesn't work. Yeah, whatever. What does the non-compulsory element add to the education system? What does it add?
and they would be encouraged when they go to attend each class. It would be considered standard to publish lesson notes from each day.
Yeah, I absolutely think that should be standard, sure. But again, that's not exclusive to non-compulsory schooling.
So that if students needed to take a day off because they were sick or exhausted or mental.
Also, a lot of teachers already do this. I think that all of them should, because I agree that sometimes people are going to have to take days off, but wait, I'm actually curious. If DemonMama hates compelling kids to do things they don't want to do, what if the kid doesn't want the vaccine? Yeah, that is a good question. I think somebody asked her this and she gave some sort of like bullshit explanation. I could be wrong though. What if they don't want to take medicine because it's gross and shots hurt? Yeah, their rationale could be, well, I'm healthy, so it's not going to stop me from being sick. I've never been sick before, and shots are painful, and I'd rather just take the risk because they don't know how to fucking take risks properly. I mean, do you care about the child's autonomy then? And what if the parent fucking agrees with them? What if their parent is a fucking religious fundamentalist freak that thinks that the vaccine is a construction of Satan? Then what? Oh yeah, just don't get the fucking vaccine then. No, fuck that shit. That shit should be mandatory.
Mentally unwell, that they could do so without feeling like they're going to get in trouble. Without having to jump through hoops and get a doctor's note and all this nonsense. They could just...
Now, I do believe that, okay, if you're a fully grown adult, then maybe it's different, okay? Once you're a fully grown adult, maybe then it's like, okay, yeah, you can just choose to fuck yourself over. But until then, I don't think that should be the case.
Not if they wanted to. We already do this in college. And let me tell you, the average 18-year-old who's going into college is not smarter than the average 14-year-old. Not me.
I think, in general, I'm quite a bit smarter than I was when I was 14. I'm sure there's some math stuff I used to be able to do that I can't do anymore, but, like, as an individual, especially in terms of my decision-making abilities, which would be the most important aspect in terms of what we're dealing with here, in terms of, like, attending college classes and whatnot, is, are you responsible enough to do so? In which case, it's like, well, I'm a lot fucking better than I was when I was fucking 14 years old. Are you kidding? I'm 19. It's been 5 years. I'm in college. I'm a lot more mature now, which doesn't say much because I'm still kind of immature sometimes, but it's whatever.
Meaningfully, they're just as dumb. But in college, we let the students skip whatever the fuck they want.
But I'm not just as dumb as I was when I was 14, and I'm a fully grown adult. Like, I'm an autonomous adult. You look super pretty. I wish I was brainwashed into looking as good as you. Aw.
So, why don't we make schools inviting, an optional thing that you can do every single...
It can be inviting without being optional. Again, if it's optional, then people are just gonna fall behind.
...day. And then, let's provide some other cool government programs. Hey, why don't we make some... doesn't even have to necessarily be government, but we'll talk about it in a government sense, because we're talking about it with the presumption of a state, because I don't want to go all the way into that. We'll talk about that too. Let's say that in addition to public schooling, we also have online education, online public education available.
That already exists. It's called Google, and I'm pretty sure it already exists in general. You mean like a standardized government-run course? Okay, I guess. Sure, that could be good. Don't know what that has to do with compulsory schooling. What if someone just doesn't give a fuck and they just don't want to learn anything because they're immature, but then they grow up and realize that they made a huge mistake? Then what?
That is maintained by communities, by libraries, and even by the federal government. You have online education that anybody can do at any time.
Wow. It's almost like we already have that on the internet. That's crazy. It's almost like you can already look stuff up and learn stuff. I do it all the time. I looked up like I did quite a bit of research on gender affirming care because I debate people sometimes. And yeah, I did that on the internet. Wow, incredible. It's almost like you can already do that.
Anytime. Imagine it like public Wikipedia. You can go there and there will be lesson plans that you can follow at your own pace to educate yourself at your own pace as your life permits.
So, like, formalized lesson plans then. Okay. I guess I see what she's saying, but At the same time, like, what does this have to do with compulsory schooling?
And you'll be encouraged. There could be all kinds of really, really wonderful.
Like, I get, oh, well, maybe somebody doesn't want to go to compulsory. Okay, I guess a better solution there would be, okay, let's say you don't want to go to school because bullying is really bad. Okay, have an online option, if that's beneficial for some people, which I'm sure it will be. Some people it won't be. But that would still be compulsory schooling. It would just be a specific type of schooling that a child can choose if that's their preference, right? This wouldn't be an argument against. Again, this wouldn't be an argument against the compulsory schooling as a concept. Yes, I heard. Sorry. But yeah, we have quite a bit of streaming left to do, so. Anyways.
Encouraging things that would be awesome. And then, what about we add a third layer, just in case? What if you also have the alternative to do something like a social service option, where you can learn a trade or a skill while voluntarily participating in things like cleaning up your community.
Yeah, we already have that. It's called volunteering hours. That's something that already exists in most schools, I'm pretty sure. You're just suggesting things that already exist, but in like a slightly different way. Yeah, why don't... you know what would be a really good idea? Is if we got rid of the entire schooling system and built it from scratch. And then we made it non-compulsory, but then we added all of the things that it already had before. Holy shit, I wish I had thought of this sooner. Oh my goodness gracious. Gee golly, what a genius idea.
Learning forestry, cleaning up national parks, things like this. Non-intensive, non-dangerous labor that you can choose to go to of your own right, and there is no punishment if you don't show up.
Yeah, this already exists.
You can just go do it, and you will get the benefits of it. Maybe you could even get cool things. Like, who knows? Maybe if you go in and do that, you get food vouchers or something cool that, like, gives you something else.
Okay.
One alternative to school is basically government-funded Skillshare, and would probably be 100 times cheaper than school and more effective, because you wouldn't be traumatizing generations of kids. But that's the secret, you see?
Okay, but then one of those things would have to be compulsory, right? So it could be the case that you have the option, but you have to choose at least one. In which case I would be fine with that, because then you would be educated.
The reason why we don't have these things is because school is really good at one thing: producing workers, producing soldiers, producing socially valuable individuals.
Sure. It has to feed into the society that it educates, which is a capitalist one. So if you want that to change, you would have to have an education system that operates outside of capitalism, which isn't realistic. Again,
that's what it's good at, and that's why it's not going anywhere, and that's why I oppose it, and that's also a huge reason for why I don't support compulsory education. And here's the thing.
But all of your reasons for not supporting it are just reasons why they're just issues with the education system in general that have nothing to do with whether or not it's compulsory. Again, these issues would still exist just as much, even if education wasn't compulsory.
If there is like a concern about like a parent who is like imprisoning their child, that's already a problem. We already know how to deal with that. We have ways to deal with child abuse.
Like what? What are the ways that child abuse is dealt with currently? That like, again, yeah, there are ways that could theoretically exist. Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. Theoretically. So basically, in this theoretical society in which people operate completely differently, and there's an entirely different culture, and capitalism isn't an issue, and also every 6-year-old that could benefit from education actually wants to be educated and makes the correct decision at a very young age. Like, this is fucking stupid.
in-person elements to online learning would be amazing. I don't even think online learning has to be the only thing. What about workshops? What if like instead of going to a school year for 8 months out of the year or 7 months out of the year, what if instead there were just classes going on at all times in a cycling order and you could just jump in at will?
Sure, but this isn't exclusive to compulsory schooling. You could just have compulsory schooling with these additional options. Like what? You don't need... Okay.
You could say, hey, I'm not doing anything this summer, and my friends are away this summer because they're off doing something or they're on vacation or whatever. I'm going to take a class this summer out of my own volition.
Yeah, and how often do children do that?
Here's something that's super interesting to me, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, people that are in college do that, but... Children, not so
Babinska
much.
says, we had some discussion on this on the Docord. Docord is amazing for discussions like this, like 10 hours ago, and I think it's important to couple this with a reformed concept of family, community,
Maybe I need to join Docord.
child raising, rather than private suburban life of kids that are growing up in a community and learning from other adults. There's a lot of useful learning there too. I agree with you. That's why I said we need to adopt an it takes a village mentality to child raising. Super important. As it turns out, guys, did you
Yeah, well, you don't need non-compulsory schooling for that, and also... non-compulsory schooling would rely on that to an extent in terms of abuse victims. But we don't have that. You can't just rely on something that doesn't currently exist and just be like, well, maybe it'll exist one day. That's not how you make policy changes. This isn't how you okay.
know that you can be the difference in a kid's life without being like a weird Reddit investigator? If you live as a part of a community, if you reconnect, if we're able to rebuild the concept of community in our country and in our world, if we're able to rebuild that, there is
yeah, that would be great if that happened.
mutual accountability that comes from community. You understand that, right? That
Okay, that would be great if we had that.
if you have a big family, you got uncles, you got aunts, you got grandparents, all of whom can go, hey, you know, I really don't think, let me help out here. Let me offer what I have to bring. There's so many ways that we could live better, that we could live better lives, that we could learn better, that we could traumatize people less if we just challenge our assumptions. And that's why I try to instill in my lovely, lovely imps, always, I try to instill a sense of critique. Being
Well, I mean, maybe you've installed that in me because I just spent however fucking long critiquing you. So, hopefully, you don't take it personally. Because, I mean, again, nothing against her. Just disagree with her take.
being critical. I want you to think about these things and go, actually, you know what? It's really fucked up because it is fucked up.
Yes, but I also think critically enough to know that your proposed solution of getting rid of compulsory schooling also is fucked up and doesn't work.
Our school system is completely fucked. And the fact that you are literally threatened. I mean, Fawn just told you himself.
I think that the main issue here is that DemonMama has failed to isolate any of the variables, right? So if you isolate the variable of whether or not schooling is compulsory and then keep all of the other variables the same, what you begin to realize is the fact that making it not compulsory wouldn't actually solve any of the issues that she complained about. So you would just end up with the same dog shit school system, but with slightly less people or a lot less people, whatever. And then also a worse economy. But whatever. By the way, what do you upload less? I don't know, lack of motivation, but I'm getting back into it.
Like, Fawn was terrified of the idea that its mom was going to get arrested. Isn't that fucked up? Isn't that a fucked up thing? And that is regular. That is normal all across America. Isn't it so fucked up that kids have to worry about, have on their shoulders, as children who are developing and learning and their brains are growing, they have to have the pressure that their parents might get arrested because they didn't do good enough in school? And they got...
Well, no, it wouldn't be that they didn't do good enough in school. It would be because they didn't show up, right? It's like, oh, you got a B+, little Jimmy. Time for your dad to go to jail. Like, that doesn't fucking happen. Even if they failed, like, that's still not gonna get their parents arrested. They would have to not show up.
in trouble?
Anyway, I'm gonna stop watching. Well, I hope you enjoyed your stay.
So fucked. So yes, I think that more or less covers all of the bases about
Goodbye, Basil Plushie. Have a good one.
this particular topic, of what I wanted to talk about on this particular topic. Compulsory education has a lot of issues.
Yeah, and all of those issues have absolutely fucking nothing to do with the fact that it's compulsory. That's the problem.
And yeah, we live in a troubled world. Our world is full of all kinds of challenges. But
That's
just because
true.
a system exists, just because an institution exists, doesn't mean that it should. Doesn't mean
Okay, well, just because an institution does things wrong doesn't mean that it shouldn't. Just because an institution does things wrong doesn't automatically mean that it shouldn't exist. It means that it should exist in a different way, in a different context, in a way that actually is more beneficial. It's not that compulsory schooling shouldn't exist. It should exist, but in a different way, in a way that isn't harmful. I don't see why it needs to not exist rather than being reformed.
mean that it has to keep existing. There's a thing that Zizek says. I think it was Zizek who said this. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misquoting. But he talks about a certain pathology of liberals that states that essentially once something comes into the world, it cannot leave. And
Yeah, well, I'm not a liberal and I don't believe that, but I believe that the best way to get something to leave would be through changing it, right? So it could be the case that you start with a capitalist society, but if you change every detail about it, about the way the economy works, if you change every word in the definition of capitalism to words that are aligned with the definition of socialism, you end up with socialism at the end. You didn't start out with it, but you end up with it. So think of it as, I guess the best analogy I can come up with is a boat. Think of a boat. And over time, you know, whether it be because the parts stop working or you just want to replace them with nicer parts, you replace each part one at a time. Now, if you just replace one part, is it the same boat? Well, yeah, pretty much. It's just a little bit different, but it's the same boat. But what about after slowly changing parts over time, you've replaced half of them? Is it the same boat? Well, kind of, but only half of it is. Now, what about when you replace the last part that hasn't been replaced yet? Well, now you have an entirely different boat. It's not the same. You have actually gotten rid of the other boat without having to destroy anything. All you did was slowly improve upon something that existed to make something better. Again, you can do that with capitalism and make it something better, which is not capitalism. You can take something that exists and morph it into something else over time. That's something you can do. And I just wish that more people that are further left saw that, because I agree with them in terms of their end goals more often than not. That's why some people would consider me to be far left, is because I have the same ideas, the same prescriptions, but the way we get there is going to be different. See, you could just destroy the entire boat so that everybody has to scramble together a new one. But what you end up with is you end up with some weird, sloppily put together piece of shit boat that might not even work. It might not even float. And then you might have to be repairing a sinking ship, which is never a good sign. But at least the capitalism boat will float, even if it doesn't move very fast and there's a little bit of leakage and it's like, it's a little falling apart. With late stage capitalism, you can replace the parts without destroying it. And I wish more people understood that. You don't have to replace the entire boat all at once. That's impossible. Well, functionally impossible. But what you can do is you can make the boat slowly turn into what you want it to be, the type of boat that you want. Anyways, that was my little side tangent / analogy. Let's continue.
And this is very true of neoliberals, especially neoliberals, but liberals of all stripes. The idea that if a institution exists, it can't be gotten rid of. That's why we still have ICE. We know ICE doesn't need to exist. ICE.
Okay, I mean, I'm somebody that I'm too far left to be considered liberal, so I guess this doesn't really apply to me as much. But there are some systems that should be kept in place.
Is a brutal, wasteful, disgusting organization, but you can't get rid of it because what would replace it? Nothing. You don't need to replace it. And
so you don't need to replace compulsory schooling? Again, that's illogical. You need something that educates people. The more educated they are, the more progressive they are. You should be in favor of that.
I would say that you could make the same argument about school. There are tons of ways to learn things. There are tons of different systems that we could put into place, but we don't need to replace a mass traumatization structure.
Well, if you replace the mass traumatization structure with a mass structure that doesn't traumatize people and actually is beneficial, then yeah, actually that would be a good thing. And also, if the mass traumatization structure does more good than nothing at all, which, let's be real, it does, because being educated is a good thing. It's better that there are people that are educated than if it were the case that they weren't. But, okay.
Because, as it turns out, just because something has come into the world, just because a state institution has come into the world, it doesn't necessarily have to stay.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Fembro. She's just invented a straw man. Nobody said you can't replace it. People are saying her reasoning is fucking stupid for wanting to throw it out. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's why I brought up the boat analogy. You can either try swimming and building a new boat in the middle of the fucking ocean, or you can stay on your existing boat and change the parts slowly over time so that it becomes the boat that you want it to be. That's how you actually change something. You don't change something by throwing it away and starting all over. You can't single-handedly do that. Even if everybody collectively agreed to do that, how do you even know that it would produce the outcome that you are intending? You wouldn't, because you'd end up with something so unstable that you don't know. You could have 100 people in the ocean with you trying to build a boat while swimming, and it turns out to be a shit fucking boat because they were trying to also fucking swim and not drown while they were building it. Again, this is why I want DemonMama to debate me, because even though I don't think she will, I think it would be a really good discussion. I think I would push back on a lot of her ideas. I think it'd be interesting. It could either turn out to be, it could either end up being really productive, or it could be a shit-flinging contest. Who knows? It'd probably be one of the two. I've debated DemonMama before on the topic of neo-pronouns. She was arguing in favor of it. I was arguing against it. This was a long time ago. This was one of my first debates. So it was very civil because I was, kind of quiet and timid. So I don't know how a debate would go between me and her now, because I have a much more aggro style of debate. But yeah, I had a more good faith passive style of debate back then, so. And frankly, I didn't really have that many good arguments at the time, so yeah. I was willing to change I'm still willing to change my position on anything if somebody presents good enough arguments, right? Anyways, with that being said, the next video we're going to be watching is called Inferno Take, Compulsory Schooling Still Sucks. So, obviously, this is the follow-up video to the video that we just watched. So, let's see what it's all about.
Let's talk about my school take, shall we, since we're on the topic? Because everybody's
oh my, it must have been Halloween while she was recording this.
still mad about them. So,
or maybe she just thought, fuck it. It'd be fun to wear this today.
For those of you who don't know,
maybe she was doing a Donald Trump impression, a funny Donald Trump meme by painting her face orange.
You know, so for those who don't know, a couple of weeks ago, there was a bunch of memes going around on Twitter about school. And it started...
Oh, boy.
Because of this anarchist account, who's like an eco-anarchist, I think, named Anarchismus. I like their account. I don't agree with everything they say, but I think they have some interesting stuff to talk about. They mostly tweet little theory and art and stuff. They're like they're like really into solar punk. Cool shit, you know? Interesting stuff. And they had a take about school being bad.
Uh-oh.
And I agree. I think school is pretty...
Yeah, I also agree. I also think school is pretty bad. It's crazy that that's not actually what I disagree with her on, though.
Bad. Guys, I think school is pretty bad. I don't think learning is bad, for the record.
That's
but
good.
There's something, and I made this mistake, by the way, just so I can do a little bit of self-critiquing. In truth, I fell into, in the heat of the moment, I fell into the conflation, even in that conversation, between school and learning.
Yes. Well, and the purpose of school ought to be learning, even if that's not currently what it is, right? That's what it ought to be. So let's say that we have an education system that doesn't fucking suck, okay? And that it prioritizes learning, okay? And it prioritizes things like learning, creativity, etc. And plays to the strengths of the individual students, and it's actually a pleasant place to be. Well, if that's the case, then why would it matter if it's compulsory? If you are forced as a child to do something that is beneficial to you, why is that an issue? Why would that be a bad thing? I'd like to know.
And I didn't mean to. It was chaotic. But nonetheless, a mistake is a mistake. The reality is...
Is it wrong to force your kid to get a vaccine? Is it wrong to force your kid to clean their room? Is it wrong to force them to clean up after them? It's not where do you fucking draw the line?
That school is actually quite bad at encouraging learning.
I agree.
It's good at forcing people to have to learn very specific things on threat of their life being ruined in one way or another.
I kind of agree, yeah.
With threats of permanent records and detentions and suspensions and all kinds of, and calling the cops and all kinds of things like that.
I mean, it's going to depend on what school you go to, but sure.
But people were like, well, shouldn't we just reform schooling?
Yes, that's a great idea. If only I had thought of that.
I don't think so, actually.
No, you don't want to reform schooling. You'd like it to stay the same, or just get rid of it.
There's this weird phenomenon that has happened, or that happens a lot among liberal circles, okay? And it's this idea that basically liberals believe that if something is in the world right now, it is essentially the baseline. It must continue to exist.
No, this is a fundamental misunderstanding. If you change something so much, it no longer even resembles the original thing that it was, or that it once was. That's the point, right? This isn't like a liberal thing. Like, I am in favor of socialism, so I wouldn't consider myself a liberal, but I also believe in pushing things that already exist in towards a certain direction, and getting rid of some things that might not be necessary, right? But it's a lot easier, or at the very least more consistent and reliable, to take something that already exists and slowly morph it over time, rather than just destroy it and create something new. Again, rather than replacing one part of your boat while sailing over the ocean at a time, if you try to replace them all or destroy the entire boat and make a new one, good fucking luck. Good fucking luck with that. You might think it might be easier because you have to deal with all of the existing parts that are really hard to replace, but building a boat from scratch is a lot more difficult and less reliable.
all institutions, hence why they're called an institution, all things that are these sort of self-perpetuating government entities or perhaps public-private entities or whatever must continue in the world because
No, not necessarily.
their absence
I don't even think that a liberal would argue this.
would be bad. And it's never fully explained why their absence.
Look, I'm not a liberal, but I don't even think that liberals believe that. I would assume, at least, that they would believe that yes, okay, some institutions don't really serve any utility, so they can go away. Or they do more harm than good, so they can go away. Right?
Would be bad, you know? But yeah, status quo warrior. Exactly. It's a status quo warrior. Okay?
Believe me, for me at least, it's the opposite. Like, if you are a reformist, you are the opposite of a status quo warrior. You are arguing against the status quo by arguing for things to be reformed. That is not the status quo. If I was arguing for the status quo, I would be arguing for the education system to stay exactly the same and for it to not be reformed because it's perfect the way it is. But guess what? That's not what I argue. I argue the opposite. It's so fucking bad that it does need to be reformed a lot and as quickly as possible. Again, this is just a blatant misinterpretation of what it means to want something to be reformed. It's not a position of wanting to maintain the status quo, to want to change something slowly over time until it becomes unfucking recognizable. Like me wanting our capitalist society to slowly change into a socialist one over time, because that's actually something that will allow us to maintain a stable fucking society while also getting the outcomes we want. That's not me wanting to maintain the status quo. Is the end goal the status quo? No.
Status quo warriors are all over the place, and they're especially common now that Biden's in power, who is the ultimate status quo warrior.
Okay. I'm not Biden.
Now, I don't know if you know this, but it has been a facet of nearly every form of art, from film to literature to music, to deeply criticize school. You ever heard of Pink Floyd?
Yeah, they do criticize school indeed. But you know what they don't go around doing? They don't go around saying that school should not be compulsory and no matter what, no matter how good it is, it shouldn't be compulsory. And if your 6-year-old wants to stay home all day and do nothing, then more power to him. I don't think that any of these people that she's referencing are saying that.
Ever heard of, like, basically every counterculture band from, I don't know, like the 60s until now, talking about how schooling is a giant indoctrination factory, literally based off of assembly lines to
yes, but this doesn't whatever.
cram as many children in to gainful employment, to being good for society, and of course, who is it who decides what's good for society but the state? And interestingly,
okay, well, the state is not necessarily a force for good or bad, right? Like, by default, it's a moral neutral, right? It's good when it does good things, and it's bad when it does bad things, right? So it could be the case that the state is a theocratic regime, more akin to what Matt Walsh is looking for. If that's the case, then yeah, the state is bad, okay? Now, if the state is simply a government that protects the rights of individual people from corporations and smaller state governments and local governments, etc., to make sure that their rights aren't infringed upon, that's a good state. That means that state is a force for good, because not all states are made equal, right? That they're neutral by default until they do things, and it's based on the things they do that determine whether or not they're good or bad.
they make you into a good employee, or they make you into a public servant via the military if you can't make it through school, or they make you a prisoner. That's usually what their goal is. One of those three outcomes is what the goal of school is.
I don't think that their goal is to make you a prisoner, though. I think that sometimes happens, and that's bad, and it shouldn't happen. But it's also going to be the case that that's not their goal, right? That doesn't benefit them economically.
Goal of school is to make you learn all of the things that the state thinks you have to know in order to keep their version of the economy going.
Okay, so what do you suggest? Oh yeah, just have every school be like a private school or like a charter school? Like, this is no different from what your average center-right fucking libertarian tech bro loser will argue. Come on, DemonMama, you're better than this. Please tell me you're better than this.
Going. And this is a historical structure. You can't just look at school now or school 5 years ago. These things are literally, they were built into the design of of schooling as we understand it now. That these institutions were built to empower the United States, often, in the case of schooling, against communism.
Yeah, well, I don't think that, and I won't say that the school system is great when it comes to describing alternative ideologies such as communism, right? But at the same time, I don't think that the state is that the people, like, I don't think that government officials are like evil villains twirling their mustaches, saying, yes, let's make everybody hate communism. That is our main goal here, is to make communism go extinct and to get rid of all the communists and socialists and anarchists, and then we as the state will rule over everybody, and then they only have 3 options, which is go to prison, be a worker bee, or serve the military. Mwahaha! I don't think that the fucking government officials are sitting there in their fucking throne rooms doing that shit, okay? Like, I think that it's a little bit more complex than, I mean, sure, some of the more right-wing people may as well be, but whatever. But that's because Republicans are evil. But that's a side point.
Against communism, whatever that boogeyman is. It's very weird to me that there's so much defense by these online people of an institution that we know does a shit-ass job.
Hold on, I'm not defending the institution. I'm just saying that schooling should still be compulsory, but should function differently from how it currently does as an institution, right? So when I want it to be reformed, I want it to function as almost like a different institution, right? That's sort of like the goal, is to get a different institution from what we currently have, right? What's the best way to get there? Well, from changing the current institution that we have into something that it currently is not.
And everybody talks about, well, yeah, but what, you think kids just shouldn't learn anything? No, there's ways. Children learn shit all the time.
Yeah, because people make them. And also, they wouldn't learn nearly as much if they didn't have to go to school.
All kinds of ways for children to learn stuff. They learn stuff on the internet. They learn stuff through experience. They learn...
yes, because everyone knows that everything on the internet ever is always correct and should never be taken with a grain of salt. Now, obviously, if you know how to look for stuff on the internet and you know what sources are reliable, then yes, that can be very useful. But you want to know one of the ways I learned how to detect when a source is or isn't reliable? We learned that shit in fucking school, okay? That's where I learned that shit. Was it something I was particularly interested in? No, I didn't give a shit. But it's useful. So, what can I say?
Learn stuff from their friends. They learn stuff from their parents, from their communities. Well, increasingly, people don't learn anything from their communities because they don't have them. People increasingly don't learn stuff from their schools because their schools are underfunded as shit.
I agree that they're underfunded, but again, if you make schooling non-compulsory, do you expect that to fix the solutions? Or sorry, do you expect that to act as a solution and fix all the problems? Do you think that, oh yeah, once it stops being compulsory, that like this communal style of living and all these communities that are tight-knit are gonna magically appear out of butt-fuck nowhere? Because if that's the case, well, that's an insane fucking position. And if that's not the case, then what is your point?
And the few things that they were able to get from school in the past, they're not able to get now. Schools have never done a good job serving neurodivergent people or people with...
Absolutely. But what do you think the solution to that is?
Learning disabilities or people with physical disabilities. Basically, anybody who's not 100% fitting into the hegemonic standard of our culture gets fucked by schools. And it's very weird, isn't it? Very, very weird.
Okay, but this isn't inherent to it being compulsory. It's inherent to all of the other issues that you described with the schooling system. Whether or not it's compulsory has no bearing on this.
And, yeah, there's all kinds of ways. I'm neurodivergent and school structure saved me. That's good for you. You should be able to choose that type of structure if you want.
Okay, but I would have chosen incorrectly as a child. But thankfully, it was mandatory. Because even though I had legitimate criticisms of the education system going as far back as I can remember when I was just a little fucking 5-year-old, and I had valid reasons to not want to go to school, but at the same time, it's still better as an outcome that I did.
You should be able to choose that if you want. But why should everyone else who isn't you have to be mandatorily forced through one specific type of learning that just so happens to do exactly what the US government wants it to do? And keep in mind that the US government is not some good entity. Guys, the US government is a entity in which capitalism is—
Okay, sure, yeah, the US bad, but again, this is a non-argument.
baked into it, into the systems of this government.
Okay, if your problem is that capitalism is baked into the systems of government, which I agree that, yeah, that kind of sucks. That's a problem with capitalism, not a problem with the education system itself. Again, the education system will simply reflect the current state of our society. That's all it does.
Oh, he's a snitch? It doesn't surprise me. You know, everybody likes to poke fun at, like, tankies, you know? For being like, oh my god, if only we could be like Vietnam and be taught the glory of Ho Chi Minh thought. Guess what? We do that. American education is disgusting. American standardized history education is shit. We don't learn about anything bad about our state. We grow—
That's not entirely true. I know that I've learned some bad things, but maybe my teachers are just built different or some shit. I don't know.
Grow up being taught that the United States is the perfect place that's never done anything wrong. And there are cracks. There are some teachers who go against that. There are some teaching organizations that push against that, but they are pushing against the will of the state. CRT being banned all over the United States. Discussions of slavery, discussions of evolution,
Yeah, and obviously none of that should be banned, right?
all these kinds of things that challenge the hegemonic structure of the state of the US.
I think that this absolutely is a solid argument against at least shit states like Florida, to be honest. As in, I at least agree with the way she's describing it.
And the problem is that just because schooling exists doesn't mean it's doing anything that it says it's supposed to. I think that a lot of people don't actually get very much from school. They get a lot from learning from their friends.
You mean their friends at school who also learn stuff from school? Okay.
They figure some stuff out on their own. Their teachers teach them some things. They get some basic school skills. They get a lot of trauma. They get a lot of pain. Some of them get shunted off into constant punishment and agony, and then sometimes they drop out, and sometimes they're criminalized, and they end up—
Again, this isn't inherent to it being compulsory, but okay.
in prison.
Should I set a stopwatch and see how long it takes for DemonMama to say something bad about school that is inherent to it being compulsory? Because I feel like it would go on infinitely. I'm pretty sure. So I don't know if I'd be able to do that. I mean, it would go way past the stream time.
A lot of people end up developing all kinds of problems from the bullying they get at school because teachers don't give a shit, and there's no—
Again, that would be an argument for maybe potentially having an online school option. But again, that doesn't mean that school wouldn't be non-compulsory.
real structure. They just kind of let kids go at it. So I had a take about it, which was basically, guys, compulsory schooling isn't the greatest thing in the universe. It really, really It really, really fucking isn't. It
Then
isn't
find a better alternative, please.
the greatest thing in the universe. It's not this this perfect structure that we all need to make sure is enshrined forever. And advocating against it does not mean advocating against learning.
But that's the outcome, is less people learn stuff, whether you like it or not.